Chapter 1160. Surge of Wind and Thunder. When the fifth seal was almost in front of Lin Yuan roared furiously. The lightning armor attached to his flood dragon roared out at this moment, and turned into a lifelike lightning dragon. It crashed into the fifth seal in front of him. Almost instantly, the lightning dragon was smashed into pieces by the fifth seal. However, the fifth seal was also at the end of its flight. When the lightning dragon was completely torn apart, the fifth seal was already so blurry that it could not be seen clearly. When it landed on Lin Yuan's body, the damage it caused was not worth mentioning. It only pushed Lin Yuan back 3 meters. It no longer had the violent aura that wanted to tear Lin Yuan apart. Yin Hong's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. For a moment, he seemed to have lost the ability to speak. That fist, that was the fist intent his father had left for him. It was also the only thing his father had left for him. He had studied it for countless years, but he could not even comprehend a trace of its true meaning. More importantly, that fist contained the human king's aura that belonged only to DXIN. That was DXIN's will that pressed forward courageously, ferociously, and firmly believed that man can conquer the heavens. That was the human king's will that surpassed the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, or even surpassed them. He had broken the aristocratic class and the theory of divine authority. He would rather destroy his country to protect the land of Yan Huang, and not let the other races touch it. He had spent his entire life to make man stand above all things. He did not hesitate to fight against Qi refinement cultivators, immortals, and primordial creatures. He had fought until his country was destroyed and his family abandoned him. After that, he still wanted to deal a fatal blow to the puppet emperor supported by Hongjun. How could this be possible? The fist aura could be broken. With a certain level of cultivation, it could be easily done. However, when the human king's will was imprinted, even a saint would have to temporarily avoid it. The fact that this Black Jiao could withstand the human king's will could only mean that the Black Jiao also possessed the human king's will, or something similar. You're done attacking. Now it's my turn. Lin Yuan raised his head and hissed as his blue-white eyes flashed with cold killing intent. Retreat quickly. However, Yin Hong's expression changed. He shouted and pushed Yu Jiang forward with a flip of his hand while he retreated explosively. At this point, so what if he hated Lin Yuan to the core? The other party could even withstand the will of a human king. He was not in existence on the same level as him. If he continued to fight with Lin Yuan, he would only be asking for humiliation. How could he give up his life here? Yu Jiang was still trying to figure out Yin Hong's punch, so he didn't come back to his senses. By the time the words retreat quickly woke him up, he had already been pushed back more than 30 meters by Yin Hong. When he looked up, he saw the 4 immortal exterminating swords coming at him. Bastard, Ruin dares to harm me. Yu Jiang's face turned cold. He opened his mouth and roared. DXIN was actually a descendant of the Yellow Emperor. However, compared to the other descendants of the Yellow Emperor, his seniority was much lower. Moreover, Yin Hong called himself DXIN and not DXIN. His seniority was even lower, so it wasn't a problem for him to call Yu Jiang ancestor. However, at the critical moment, this descendant of his actually pushed him out to block the attack without hesitation. This was something that even a bastard wouldn't do. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. Was the words retreat quickly a warning? No, it was because Yin Hong saw that he was trying to figure out DXIN's fist intent, and deliberately roared. Firstly, it was to interrupt his comprehension. Secondly, it was because he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to react to Lin Yuan's attack and would be killed, unable to buy enough time for him to escape. However, at this moment, Yu Jiang had already been driven to this point. If he still wanted to escape, he would completely treat Lin Yuan as a decoration. He could only roar and brace himself to collide with the afterimages of the 4 immortal exterminating swords. In fact, if he was at his peak, Yu Jiang wouldn't have been able to deal with these 4 afterimages cut from the long river of time. However, he wasn't at his peak at all. He had stayed in the Tianwu world for a long time. Although it wasn't that he didn't receive the power of incense, it was still completely unable to make ends meet. If that wasn't the case, why would he run to the northern frontier to provoke the Black Jiao? Wasn't it just to spread the orthodoxy? In the end, he didn't take advantage of the situation. He even fought a big battle with Batu and Kagura. The injuries he suffered weren't worth mentioning, but the consumption of his divine power couldn't be ignored. The power he could erupt with at this moment was not much stronger than that of the natives of the Tianwu world. At this moment, facing this illusory version of the immortal exterminating sword formation, he learned from the mistakes of Buxing Zhou. At the same time, the group of primitive desolate realm experts who were secretly watching the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although they disdained Yu Jiang and Yin Hong's character, in any case, they were all from the primitive desolate realm. After interacting with each other for so many years, they more or less had some friendship. At this moment, when they saw Yu Jiang about to die, they couldn't help but feel a little sad. A primitive desolate realm expert crossed space and entered Hamba's secluded cultivation place. He said in a deep voice, "Senior Hamba, although you and the Black Jiao were somewhat filthy before, it was only a misunderstanding. Later on, you also pointed out a path for the northern frontier. It can be considered as mending the relationship between both sides. If you come forward to plead for mercy for Yu Jiang, I think the Black Jiao will at least give you face, right? Why don't you? He deserves to die. Both of them deserve to die." Hamba's hoarse voice suddenly rang out, directly interrupting the primitive desolate realm expert's words. The primitive desolate realm expert's voice came to an abrupt halt. He shrunk his neck somewhat awkwardly. Yu Jiang and Yin Hong were of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. Hamba was even the Yellow Emperor's daughter. In the war to unify Yan Huang, Hamba had also made great contributions to the Yellow Emperor. Although the ending wasn't good, she had left her name behind. Compared to Yu Jiang and Yin Hong, she was much stronger. When they interacted normally, Yu Jiang and Yin Hong also respectfully addressed Hamba as ancestor. However, at this moment, Hamba's response was deserved to die. When Yu Jiang was in trouble? If they were to fall into the Black Jiao's hands one day, Hamba would definitely ignore them even more. Hamba turned her head. Her long hair that was like withered grass covered her face. Her expression couldn't be seen clearly. However, her hoarse voice was filled with endless killing intent. She said coldly, "When I find out the whereabouts of Yin Hong, I will definitely kill this bastard with my own hands. I will not let this bastard tarnish the reputation of the Yellow Emperor's bloodline. And you bunch of clowns. Although your mouth sounds nice, do you really think that I don't know what you are planning?" When he spoke up to hear, boundless baleful aura and blood energy burst out from Hamba's body. His pair of deathly gray eyes seemed to turn as he stared at the primordial creature's head, and he said coldly, "If you continue to instigate my Yellow Emperor's bloodline to become enemies with the Black Flood Dragon, then I'll dig out your heart once more and see if you really have a heart of 7 orifices. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's do it." Chapter 1161. Boom. The sword shadows of the 4 immortal slaying swords dispersed. Yu Jiang's broken body fell from the sword formation. Even his primordial spirit was swept away by the nether realm's black water. Seeing Yu Jiang being killed and Yin Hong fleeing, countless residents of Shunning City clapped their hands in joy. After all, in their eyes, although Lin Yuan was a bit cold-blooded, he was still protecting the northern frontier. Moreover, Lin Yuan was usually scolded as a barbaric demon. At this time, as long as Li Zhong stood out, they would believe that the northern frontier was protecting them. Lin Yuan's attitude was not important at all. Even if he did good things, these people would not appreciate it. All intelligent creatures had a common problem. They would only believe what they wanted to believe. For example, in the history of Lin Yuan's previous life, Wu Zetian had won 26 battles, and had won 23 battles. There were still 2 battles left before the war started. At most, she had lost 1 foreign battle. She had become the world's overlord, and all the countries had established Wuzhou as the top of the world at that time. However, in the words of Tang and Song Rushing, Wu Zetian had lost 9 out of 10 battles, and the military prestige of the Tang Empire had been completely destroyed. After Li Longji ascended the throne, he pushed down Wu Zetian and crazily discredited Wu Zetian. He cancelled the system of Wu Zetian and wantonly appointed people from the Confucian sect and the aristocratic families. In the later years of Li Longji's reign, the Tang dynasty's territory seemed vast, but in reality, It had nothing to do with Lilongji. There were provincial governors everywhere. It was just like a country within a country. In a serious situation, Lilongji could not even mobilize the troops he could use. He was attacked to the capital and did not dare to fight with the rebel army. He directly abandoned the capital and fled. Such a retarded person was praised by the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty to be a hero of the Golden Age, an eternal emperor. From this, one could see how much wealth Wu Zetian had left behind for him. Then, why did Lilongji and the scholars of Tang and Song dynasty crazily discredit Wu Zetian and push the blame to Wu Zetian, claiming that Wu Zetian was a tyrant who only knew how to use her beauty to entertain people? The answer was very simple. Because they could not accept it. Whether it was Lilongji or the later emperors, whether it was the scholars of the Tang dynasty or the Song dynasty, none of them could accept the fact that a lowly woman had climbed over their heads and performed countless feats that they didn't even dare to imagine. Therefore, they would rather abandon this glorious history than truthfully record Wu Jiong as a famous ruler throughout the ages. In Lin Yuan's previous life, almost all historians, except for those scum who fish for fame and praise and pretend to know when they don't know to deceive the ignorant, knew that the history of the Tang and Song dynasties was just for fun. They would rather believe in the private notes circulating among the people with the evidence of unearthed cultural relics, than directly believe in official history, such as the comprehensive mirror for governance. It was the same in the northern frontier. These people would rather believe that all the benevolent policies in the northern frontier came from Li Zhong than believe that it was always Lin Yuan who treated them well. Although Lin Yuan added fuel to the fire behind the scenes, the reason why this idea could be so popular was that these people already had such a seed in their hearts. Those ambitious people, and Lin Yuan just fertilized this seed and watered it. How Lin Yuan did it? Why did it have anything to do with them? In short, they didn't believe it. At this moment, the third prince, who had been escorted into Shunning City by the imperial guards, was even more despondent. Looking at the dead and wounded Shunning City, looking at the cultivators who were still pale after surviving the disaster, and looking at the godlike figure in the sky, there was only one thought left in his mind. My father's brain was kicked by a donkey. After a quarter of an hour, in the prince's mansion in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan's body was coiled up. His blue-white vertical pupils looked at the pale-faced brothers Li Zhong and Li Xian, and he said in a deep voice, "Although Shunning City suffered a great loss in this battle, it can't be said that we didn't gain anything. At least after this battle, the demon venerable of the southern wasteland will tuck his tail between his legs, and the surrounding empires won't even dare to breathe loudly. In the short term, the northern frontier will have no worries. Therefore, in this king's opinion, we should kill the Frost Mirror Khan and occupy the Frost Mirror grassland. Let's start the plan as usual, and not delay anymore." Li Zhong thought for a moment, then he cupped his hands toward Lin Yuan and said, "Yes, I will do it right away." Then Lin Yuan's gaze fell on Li Xian as he said with a smile, "This drop in realm is your calamity, but it is also your opportunity. If you can cross this hurdle, your future achievements will be limitless. Even if you can't compare to your elder brother, you will definitely not be trapped in the void realm like a mediocre person, and not be able to find the way for a lifetime." Yes. Li Xian's aura was still weak, but he still cupped his hands and replied in a deep voice. Lin Yuan gently swayed his dragon tail and said indifferently, "All right, I know you're feeling uncomfortable and can't take this lying down. Therefore, this king grants you an indefinite leave. You can go to Mount Shaoyi or go to the academies of the other empires. This king will take care of everything for you. What do you think? When you come back, you'll be promoted from the commander of the embroidered uniform guards to the governor of the embroidered uniform guards. You'll be in complete control of the embroidered uniform guards in the northern frontier. Those spies outside will also be under your command. What do you think?" Li Xian's breathing paused for a moment. This was using him as a knife. Ying Tianguan of Buxing continent had already been handed over to Yi Belan to deal with. The remaining Mount Shaoyi Zen monastery, and the academies of the Confucian sect that had Song Xuebu's portraits hanging on their walls as offerings were all targets for Lin Yuan to take revenge on. And now, Lin Yuan had given him this task to show others just how ruthless the most ferocious mad dog on the northern frontier was. This was a warning to those forces that wanted to make an enemy out of the northern frontier. It was to let them think twice before making an enemy out of the northern frontier. If they didn't have the ability to overthrow the northern frontier, then when the northern frontier counterattacked, not to mention those who were related to them, even those who were friends with them would have to die. Whether this matter was done well or not, it would cause a lot of trouble. Countless years later, they would be scolded so badly that they wouldn't be able to raise their heads. Then could they not do it? That was fine. Later on, the embroidered uniform guards would directly send a governor who dared to do this and directly suppress Li Xian until he couldn't breathe. Would you believe it? The northern frontier lacked everything now, but it didn't lack capable people. There were many people who were willing to be this mad dog. As for being scolded, would they be afraid of being scolded if they were already a mad dog? If they were really scolded, it would mean that they didn't kill enough, didn't punish enough, and didn't do enough. After taking a deep breath, Li Xian licked his lips and a sinister smile appeared on his pale face. He said in a cold voice, "By the decree of the Dragon King, during this holiday, this subordinate will definitely tell those forces that want to make an enemy out of the northern frontier what will happen to them if they fail to take action." Chapter 1162. 3 days later. The old land of the Shenwu dynasty, the Central Plains, near the imperial capital, Yi Bailin, with his clothes torn and his weapon stained with blood, was riding on a green wolf in the Wisdom State. He looked gloomily in the direction of the Yingtian Temple. Of the 2,000 Yi Bailin riders, less than 1,000 had come to report, and most of them were injured. Yingtianguan's formation was located in every one of the 108 cities and towns. In order to remove these formation corps, Yi Buhuan's cavalry used all means possible to find out the location of the formation corps within 3 days. However, there were always mistakes in their actions. Yingtianguan's people naturally had some quick-witted people who could see what these new refugees were plotting. Therefore, the battle to remove the formation corps did not go smoothly. Fortunately, it was still completed in the end. Bureau Chief, the Yingtian Temple must have received the news. Even if we did it cleanly, the formation eyes can't be hidden. At the moment, the Yingtian Temple should have gathered their disciples from all over the country. Maybe they have borrowed some masters from their friends. Can we really slaughter the Yingtian Temple with just the few of us? One of Yi Bailin's riders rode his horse to Yi Bailin's side. With a simple and honest face, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm not afraid of death. I'm just worried that if we don't complete the task given by the Dragon King, those little bastards of the genie guards will step on us." Yi Bailin silently wiped the blood off his saber and said slowly, "Who told you that I expect you to slaughter the Yingtian Temple?" But Yi Bailin's rider was slightly startled and said with a simple face, "We only have so many brothers. Could it be that the bureau chief has asked for other reinforcements?" "No reinforcements, but we do have evil spirits." Yi Bailin raised his saber and pointed at the gate of the Yingtian Temple. He said with a cold face, "There are some talismans buried outside the Yingtian Temple to deter the sky demon. What we need to do later is to rush into the gate of the Yingtian Temple and open the bamboo tubes I gave you before. Then we will pour out the things inside and dirty the talismans used to deter the sky demon. In addition, the things in the bamboo tubes can attract the sky demon. When the time comes, the sky demon will swarm in. Even if they have other means, it will be of no use. I am the one who will succeed in this. Even if I don't stop at night, I'm not afraid of death. It's all up to me." Fearless in the face of death, a group of unremitting night riders raised the sabers in their hands and roared in unison. More than 1,000 of them storming the gate of Yingtian Temple was already a matter of life and death. At that time, if they took out the demon-attracting item, they would inevitably fall into a situation of being attacked from both front and rear. Therefore, Yi Bailin's words were tantamount to telling them that this trip would only end in death. But even if they were to drag Yingtianguan down with them, none of the night uncollected cavalry had the slightest intention of retreating. Instead, they all raised their war blades and shouted out their battle cry. On the other side, the Frost Mirror cavalry, who had been besieged by the northern frontier for more than 3 months, was now facing a huge crisis. The cavalry of the Shuangjian dynasty, except for the Blood Liao Knights and some tribal khans, was mainly composed of light cavalry. However, no matter how rich the Shuangjian dynasty was, they could only afford heavy cavalry with 3 horses at most. One was for riding, one was for storing equipment, and one was for maintaining sufficient physical strength at all times in case of a sudden battle. The light cavalry was even worse. Light cavalry basically only had one mount. Although the weight of their armor was not as exaggerated as that of heavy cavalry, they did not have mounts that could be changed. Therefore, they could only bring as few supplies as possible. A Frost Mirror cavalry could only bring enough rations to last for 3 days at most. Normally, they mainly relied on raiding places and transporting supplies behind the main army. There had never been any major problems because when it came to cavalry, before the rise of the northern frontier, the Shuangjian dynasty was definitely the undisputed number 1. They had always been the ones robbing others. There had never been a situation where they were surrounded and attacked. However, when they encountered the northern frontier this time, they were clearly at a disadvantage. They encountered the even more terrifying northern frontier dragon cavalry, and were suppressed to the point where they could not breathe. When the Blood Liao Knights finally arrived, they were defeated by the enemy's feigned defeat and counterattack tactics. The remaining Frost Mirror cavalry did not manage to escape either. When they turned around, they encountered the Blackwater army that was constantly encircling them. There was also the equally elite night cavalry. Those night cavalry were like evil spirits hiding in the grasslands. As long as they were targeted, there was no way to get rid of them. Sooner or later, they would be completely devoured by them or the Blackwater army that came to support them. Right now, the Shuangjian dynasty's main army was restricted to the northern frontiers area near the Great Wall. Even though the Northern Frontier Army did not attack, they knew that the Northern Frontier Army would not let them off so easily. At the very least, they would take a layer of skin off them. The Frost Mirror tribes had run out of dry rations, and the supplies that were intercepted along with the main army had been eaten as well. The Frost Mirror tribes had completely lost their composure as an alliance army. When they ran out of food, they did not hesitate to attack their comrades from other tribes and steal as much food as they could so that they could live longer. They would only have a chance to live if they could survive until the Northern Alliance decided to put them on trial. At this point, they could no longer steal rations. However, the Frost Mirror tribes were still fighting and killing each other. At first, Frost Mirror Khan thought that they were just venting their negative emotions. But later, he noticed that the bodies of the Frost Mirror tribe's warriors would be taken away by both sides. Once, when he went out for an inspection to boost morale, he noticed that some tribes were still drinking meat soup. Although they were not in good spirits, they were still able to survive. However, when someone handed him a bowl of meat soup, he realized that they had run out of food. Even their mounts had been eaten. This meat soup, Frost Mirror Khan felt his scalp go numb. When he came back to his senses, he was already back in his own camp. He did not dare to observe the situation of the other Frost Mirror tribes. Those were no longer human. They were a bunch of monsters in human skin. What was the Northern Frontier Army trying to do? Why did they treat them like this? They were going to die anyway. Why couldn't they just give them a quick death? Frost Mirror Khan held his head in pain and said with a sorrowful face, "I can't take it anymore. I can't live like this anymore. Men, go to the Northern Frontier Great Wall and announce that this king wants to see the Black Jiao. If the Black Jiao doesn't want to see him, then Li Zhong can. This king wants to ask them what they want to let us go." Chapter 1163. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion, Conference Hall. Li Zhong slowly put down the teacup in his hand and said with a mocking look, "Who has the time to meet them? I think this old dog is really shameless. He has been forced into such a desperate situation, but he is still hoping for a way out? If I were in such a situation, I would have killed myself to avoid being humiliated. What a shame. To be the emperor of a dynasty. You can't say that." A middle-aged man in a cyan robe also put down the teacup in his hand and said with a faint smile, "The Shuangjian dynasty has been relying on their fast horses to look down on the demonic beasts in the Hengduan Mountains. In their eyes, the Kumu dynasty and the Shengwu dynasty are like money bags. They can take as much as they want. Anyway, These barbarians are used to fighting to support their fighting. The last thing they are afraid of is being stubborn. Therefore, although they are forced into a desperate situation now, when they return to the Frost Mirror grassland, they will most likely continue to plunder the northern frontier. If Lin Yuan were here, he would definitely agree with the middle-aged man's words. After all, the nomadic people had always been like this. The Han dynasty destroyed the Xiongnu tribe. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, the Central Plains suffered a great loss due to the chaos of the feudal lords. However, the foreign tribes still dared to rebel, and created the tragedy known as the Five Barbarians Rebellion. The Mongolian Yuan dynasty was almost destroyed by the Ming dynasty. The Golden family lost its prestige, and the Ming dynasty was defeated by the Manchurian Qing. For these nomadic people in the feudal period, you could either keep beating them until they could not raise their heads or wait for them to plunder a large amount of wealth, land, and population like the Tang and Song dynasties. There was no possibility of peace between the two sides. Li Zhong laughed and did not respond to the middle-aged man's words. Instead, he said in a deep voice, "Master Wu, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. You and I both know why you came to the northern frontier this time. As for how to deal with the Shuangjian dynasty, my Dragon King will make the decision. Master Wu has no right to criticize me." Master Wu pondered for a moment, then shook his head gently and said, "I am just stating the facts. Besides, since the king of the northern frontier knows what I am here for, you should know that there is nothing more worthwhile for the northern frontier than cooperating with us, right?" That may be the case, but the problem is that Master Wu should know that the northern frontier clans have their own rules. Whether it is Dragon King, me, or the northern frontier clans, none of us will allow anyone to break the rules. Li Zhong shook his head and smiled. The Dragon King has his own decision regarding the Frost Mirror Prairie. Master Wu, you came here for nothing. Master Wu was not a clan master from the Shenwu dynasty, or a tribal Khan from the prairie. Following the demise of the Shenwu dynasty, some powers that had been suppressed by the Shenwu dynasty came out from the shadows and formed a new power. They wanted to use trade to buy the prairie and become a new dynasty to maintain the structure of the 7 dynasties. However, this idea was clearly wishful thinking. Not to mention whether Lin Yuan would agree to this kind of thing. Just the aristocratic families of the northern region would not allow outsiders to snatch food from their bowls. Everyone in the northern region knew that the Frost Mirror grassland existed in name only. This also meant that if Lin Yuan did not make any other arrangements, all the products of the Frost Mirror grassland would be merged into the Chamber of Commerce of the northern region. In the eyes of those aristocratic families, it was another huge sum of money flowing into their pockets. At this time, Lin Yuan could keep the Frost Mirror grassland, but he could never hand it over to other forces. I think you should reconsider, because we've come with sincerity. First of all, the clans in the north are all clans from the Shenwu dynasty. Their combined strength is far from what they used to be at their peak. This also means that even if these clans work together, they're just ants that can be destroyed with a flick of the finger in the north. It's the same for the north and the other forces. Therefore, these clans definitely won't be able to take a piece of meat like the Frost Mirror Prairie. If you want to support a puppet regime in the northern frontier, it will be impossible to succeed. Even if you do support a puppet regime, in the eyes of the other dynasties, you will be destroying the structure of the 7 dynasties. When the time comes, the Deadwood dynasty will definitely attack this puppet regime, and even swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie that you fought so hard to conquer. Think about it. Are you willing to let the Deadwood dynasty take advantage of the land that the men of the northern frontier fought for? That's obviously not realistic. Therefore, once the Deadwood dynasty makes a move, the northern frontier will definitely be locked in a long war with the Deadwood dynasty. This is definitely not a good situation for the development of the northern frontier. The patriarch of the Wu family sucked in a deep breath and patted his chest. He smiled. But if you give the Frost Mirror Plains to us, you won't have to worry about that at all. With our strength, we might not be able to take on the Witheredwood Empire, but we can keep them busy for quite some time even without the support of the North. During that time, the North will be able to devour the Azure River Empire or the Chuyan Empire. At that time, the North won't even need to send troops. All we need to do is express our support, and the Witheredwood Empire will give up on attacking us. Family head Wu's voice was very tempting. Thinking about it from what he said, it was indeed a very tempting suggestion. A group of forces that did not belong to the northern frontier had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie. No matter what the outside world thought, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely not let go of this great opportunity to swallow the Frost Mirror Prairie. At that time, the two sides would definitely be locked in a tug of war. If nothing unexpected happened, the Deadwood dynasty would definitely have the upper hand. At that time, the new force that had taken over the Frost Mirror Prairie would have to rely on the northern frontier to barely survive. More importantly, the appearance of this new force would form a flesh barrier that would stop the most troublesome Deadwood dynasty for the northern frontier. It would give the northern frontier enough time to swallow the Qingjiang dynasty and the Chuyan dynasty. Even if they wanted stability, taking back the land that the Shimwu dynasty had lost was a good choice. It would also give the northern frontier enough time to accumulate strength and build a foundation for conquering the world. It could be seen that family head Wu had put in a lot of effort before coming to the northern frontier. Not only did he see the northern frontier's ambition, but he even planned the easiest path for the northern frontier. If it was before, Li Zhong might really be tempted, but now, Li Zhong just wanted to spit on family head Wu's face. If family head Wu was not an idiot, then he wanted to push the northern frontier to the position of public enemy. Chapter 1164. It seemed like the latter was more likely because they would only have a chance to attack if the northern frontier became the public enemy. They could use the northern frontier's power and resources to quickly gain a foothold and improve themselves. When the northern frontier expanded to a certain extent and attracted the attention of all the empires, they could naturally join forces with the Deadwood dynasty to attack the northern frontier. They could also use the geographical advantage of being close to the northern frontier to devour a large amount of resources from the northern frontier to fatten themselves up. Li Zhong picked up the teacup next to him and squinted at Master Wu. He didn't say anything. Master Wu paused for a moment. He seemed to be thinking about where he had gone wrong. Then his expression changed slightly. He cupped his hands at Li Zhong and said, "If the northern frontier king doesn't believe in our sincerity, we can use the northern frontier's name. If the northern frontier becomes the public enemy of all the empires, we won't be able to escape. Also, I can guarantee that all the benefits we get from the Frost Mirror grassland will be given to you for free, except for the resources necessary for development, in exchange for the protection of the northern frontier." At this point he revealed a warm smile and added, "We are really sincere." Li Zhong was still looking at Master Wu. After 2 breaths he said with a fake smile, "I've said that the Dragon King has other plans for the Frost Mirror grassland. Even if I promise you, it's another matter whether I can do it or not. Therefore, Master Wu, you're destined to come here for nothing." Master Wu's expression changed suddenly. No matter what he said, he still wouldn't listen. He came here with a mission. If he couldn't persuade Li Zhong to give up the Frost Mirror grassland, he didn't even dare to think about what would happen to him after he reported back. "Let's not talk about this anymore." Li Zhong smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Wu family head's sincerity, I have indeed seen it. However, I also have my own difficulties. Wu family head should be clear about this, right? I'm only the king of the northern frontier in name. Apart from having a bit of authority in the northern frontier prince's mansion, I can't mobilize any of the other government offices, let alone the northern frontier army, which is independent of the administrative system." Hearing this, Patriarch Wu sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he had long known that Li Zhong was only a puppet pushed forward by Lin Yuan, with the efforts of various forces, the introduction and implementation of the policies that benefited the people in the northern frontier were all placed on Li Zhong's head, and Lin Yuan, who had actually proposed all of this, was instead smeared as a cruel and ruthless demon beast. Under such circumstances, not to mention Li Zhong, who could become the king of the northern frontier, even a pig should have some influence, right? However, he had to believe Li Zhong's words. Because the northern frontier was different from other dynasties. There was no such thing as an imperial court in the northern frontier. Each government office was an independent system. Whether Lin Yuan existed or not, Li Zhong was only the king of the northern frontier in name. He only had the power to approve the proposals of other government offices, reject the proposals, and let them reconsider. He would not have the power to kill his subordinates like other rulers in other places. However, didn't Li Zhong's words make it clear that in the northern frontier, only Lin Yuan's words carried weight? Li Zhong was not the only one who wanted to make this happen. Unless he could persuade more than half of the government offices in the northern frontier and the military of the northern frontier, it was possible to force Lin Yuan to agree to this matter. And it was just a possibility. Even if Li Zhong wanted to do something, those who supported him would only be the mortals who did not know the truth. The local cultivators, aristocratic families, and even the itinerant cultivators who migrated from other places who knew who had the final say in the northern frontier were all on Lin Yuan's side. Li Zhong could mobilize all the mortals in the northern frontier to try to overthrow Lin Yuan's rule. For these cultivators who submitted to Lin Yuan, he had to kill as many of them as he could to make them not dare to continue to cause trouble. After thinking for a moment, Master Wu said in a deep voice, "The king of the northern frontier has been oppressed by the Black Jiao to such a state. Don't you want to seize this opportunity to join forces with us to overthrow the Black Jiao's rule and monopolize the northern frontier?" "Oh." Li Zhong raised his eyebrows and said with great interest, "It seems that Master Wu has come prepared. Then tell me, what should I do to monopolize the northern frontier? If I join forces with you, how can I guarantee that I can defeat the Black Jiao? And how can I guarantee that you, or the person behind you will not become the new Black Jiao, and continue to step on my head and abuse me?" Master Wu smiled, and a sharp light suddenly flashed in his eyes. As expected, he knew that a capable person like Li Zhong would never be willing to submit to others. Moreover, the one who really ruled the northern frontier was a demon beast. Speaking of this, he was no longer sleepy. The king of the northern frontier should know that the Black Jiao is getting weaker and weaker. Before he went to the Endless Sea, there were 2 rebellions by the king of the northern frontier, but they were quickly suppressed by the Black Jiao. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Black Jiao at that time was completely righteous. Even if he attacked the rebels, they would be isolated and helpless. But you are different. You are now the king of benevolence that the people of the northern frontier talk about. Even if the Black Jiao wants to touch you, he still needs to see if the people below are willing or not, right? The label of rebellion can't be placed on your head. To put it bluntly, the Black Jiao is already unpopular. The people of the northern frontier can't wait for you to become the king of the northern frontier, and not the puppet king that the Black Jiao has pushed out. Also, as long as you are willing to be on good terms with the aristocratic families and sects, under the Black Jiao's oppressive rule, the various cultivation forces will definitely be dissatisfied. Even if the various forces don't dare to jump out to support you directly, they will also not completely fall to the Black Jiao's side. If you have our help behind the scenes, even if you can't kill the Black Jiao, driving it away won't be a problem. This is what the people want. The smile on Master Wu's face grew wider and wider, and he said, "Also that self-proclaimed crown prince of the Thousand Swords dynasty, Chou Wuying, and his subordinate Lei Fan are now cooperating with us. As long as you agree, they will also be able to get your help. With the support of the people of the northern frontier, and those people from the south, what are you worried about?" Do. Li Zhong's right hand gently knocked on the table, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. After a while, Li Zhong slowly raised his head, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes, and said, "How can I believe that you won't replace the Black Jiao? Is there a difference between being the Black Jiao's puppet king and being your puppet king?" Chapter 1165. We're not that ambitious. Family Head Wu smiled as he sipped his tea. The Frost Mirror grassland is enough for us to eat. If we try to take over the northern frontier, we'll definitely die. I can only say that you're overthinking things. Li Zhong was silent for a moment before he suddenly laughed. "So, if we go according to your plan, what do I have to do? Or rather, what do I have to give you in order to gain your trust?" The Frost Mirror grassland. Family Head Wu's eyes flashed with fanaticism. We're not interested in the northern frontier. However, we won't allow the 7 empires to break apart the Tianwu continent. We'll establish a new Shuangjian dynasty. After that, as long as you maintain your current attitude, we'll help you reclaim the lost land of the Xinwu dynasty. He paused for a moment as he restrained the fanaticism in his eyes. You just have to convince Black Jiao to hand the Frost Mirror grassland over to us. If possible, we also hope to obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Whether it's manpower or materials, we're confident that we won't lose to the Northern Frontier. As long as you help us obtain the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works research, we'll be able to produce a large amount of related equipment very quickly. This will be extremely beneficial to you. The Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works. Li Zhong's expression suddenly became strange. The technology of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could be considered black technology in the Tianwu world. It was several levels ahead of the other empires' technology, and even the Heavenly Gates technology. After all, it was a concept that Lin Yuan had brought over from his previous world. It completely abandoned the rigid requirements of the user's strength. The equipment produced by the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works could easily kill a cultivator if they were caught off guard. It was just like the battle at the Great Wall of the Northern Frontier. The Northern Frontier's army had only ignited their gunpowder without anyone controlling it, but they had still managed to destroy the Shueliao Knights. This had caused the only army of the Shuangjian dynasty that could contend with the Northern Frontier's Dragon Riders to be completely annihilated. It had also caused the Shuangjian dynasty's army to be forced into a desperate situation, unable to even break out of the encirclement. According to the Tianwu world's technology tree, different magical tools and treasures in the hands of different people would erupt with different effects. As a result, the same treasures with different cultivations could really be used to show off in front of Master Guan. However, the equipment produced by the Northern Frontier was different. It was just like how a child could easily kill an adult with a gun. The difference between the two was just that great. I'm afraid I cannot fulfill this request. Li Zhong sighed and said, You might not know much about the Northern Frontier. Every government office in the Northern Frontier is an independent system. Different positions in the Northern Frontier have different levels of authority. For example, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards in the Northern Frontier is not inferior to my position as the King of the Northern Frontier. However, the Commander-in-Chief of the Embroidered Uniform Guards cannot even send a spy to the Ministry of Works. All the members of the Ministry of Works are secretly selected by the Dragon King. The authority of the Minister of Works is even higher than mine. It can be said that I am their superior in name, but the Minister of Works is still my superior in terms of authority. Li Zhong's expression turned ugly. He frowned and said, Whether it is the ownership of the Frost Mirror grassland or the results of the Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works, they are all matters that are far beyond my authority. Whether I can fulfill your request or not is another matter. Even if I can, I will be investigated immediately. Right now, I suspect that you have no intention of cooperating with me. You misunderstood. You misunderstood. Wu family head's forehead was suddenly covered with a layer of cold sweat. Because of these few words, the atmosphere that had been eased with great difficulty became cold again. Family head Wu wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said with an obsequious smile, It's my fault, my fault. I didn't even know the situation in the northern region, so I made a rash request of you. However, these two conditions are things that we are determined to achieve. Since you can't do it for the time being, we won't force you. How about this? Please give me a list of people to see who we need to convince to achieve these conditions. I will try to convince them one by one. If anything happens, I will bear all the responsibility. How about it? 4 hours later, Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, backyard. Li Zhong stood in front of Lin Yuan with his hands behind his back. He said in a deep voice, That's the gist of it. However, the other party is very tight-lipped. They did not reveal which faction they belong to. During the conversation, they mentioned to me more than once that they do not want to annex the Northern Frontier or the other empires. They only want to maintain the structure of the 7 great empires in Tianwu continent. Therefore, I deduce that they want us to focus our attention on the guardian of the Heavenly Gate. Lin Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Then do you think that it is possible that the other party is really the guardian of the heavenly gate?" Li Zhong shook his head lightly and said, "There is indeed such a possibility, but the possibility is not high. Previously, the guardian of the heavenly gate did not place spies in the northern frontier. Now we can be sure that there are still people from the guardian of the heavenly gate in the northern frontier. However, for guardian of the heavenly gate like Ding Zai, unless it is absolutely necessary, they will not reveal their identity. Moreover, even if they reveal their identity, they will directly state which faction they belong to. This is their pride. Therefore, this group of people should want us to focus our attention on the guardian of the heavenly gate. It would be best if there is a conflict with the guardian of the heavenly gate. I suspect that they may have come from the south. South demon sect disciples? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "Okay, I know. Continue to follow up on this matter. When necessary, you can reveal some research results of the Ministry of Works to them. However, there is no need to feed them too much. You can handle it yourself." "Yes." Li Zhong cupped his hands and said in a deep voice. After Li Zhong left, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Hong Jun, this guy, was strong, but he always felt that he was suffering from paranoia. Originally, he was a grand cultivator who relied on the heavenly Tao to become his own body. In the end, he merged with the heavenly Tao and treated the heavenly Tao as a puppet. Later on, he directly suppressed the mortal and earth Taos. Now that he felt that the heavenly martial world was a threat to him, Hongjuan's movements were obviously bigger. First, it was the generals Hung and Ha, Mosquito Daoran and the others who came out in the open. Behind the scenes, there was also Yin Hong who was on the investiture of the gods list. Now even the demon sect disciples who were related to the Nether River ancestor were involved in this matter. The invasion of the great desolate world into the heavenly martial world was obviously getting more and more serious. Chapter 1166. The investiture of the gods was an inescapable existence in the history of myths and legends. When talking about the investiture of the gods, it was impossible to avoid the mention of the immortals. It was also from the investiture of the gods that the eldritch world had never given birth to another powerful life form. For example, Neza and the monkey were worshipped by countless people. They were existences like the god of war. In essence, they were also chi refinement cultivators. Moreover, Neza killed the third prince and lost his life. He seemed to have revived, but he became a puppet in the hands of perfected Tai. As for the monkey's combat power, it was indeed debatable. The title of Great Sage equaling heaven was enough to describe the monkey's character, but it did not match his strength. It was not that the Great Sage equaling heaven was not worthy of the monkey. It was the monkey who was not worthy of the Great Sage equaling heaven. If the monkey wanted to wreak havoc in the heavenly palace and use the flower fruit mountain as the base, he would definitely go through the east heavenly gate. The monkey insisted on going to the south heavenly gate, because the person guarding the east heavenly gate was someone the monkey did not dare to provoke. Not to mention that person, even that person's mount could beat up a monkey. The Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was that person's mount. According to the records in the Taoist books, a roar from the nine-headed lion could open the Hell's Gate. In the journey to the west, the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits also roared. He was an existence that could reach the three sages and the nine springs. He was an unparalleled great demon that was respected by all kinds of lion demons as the ancestor. Compared to the monkey's self-titled Great Sage equaling heaven, the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was undoubtedly more terrifying. In the original journey to the west, when the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits was a demon in the lower realm, he did indeed beat the monkey. To be precise, he beat the monkey and Monk San together. The monkey could not escape from the Grand Saint of Nine Spirits, even if he did a somersault. The West Heavenly Gate led directly to the Spirit Mountain in the west. The person guarding it was either a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Similarly, they were existences that the monkey could not afford to provoke. As for the person guarding the North Heavenly Gate, it was Great Emperor Zhenwu, the existence that was known as the Demon Buster Patriarch. Even if the Grand Supreme and Hongjun were to fight, and the deities wanted to go easy on the monkey, there was still a rule. Great Emperor Zhenwu could not beat the monkey. Great Emperor Zhenwu's face, therefore, The monkey only dared to act impudently at the southern heavenly gate. After all, although the southern heavenly gate had many guardians, the strongest was still the Grand Supreme Elder. The journey to the west was a trap, and the Grand Supreme Elder's attitude towards the monkey had always been ambiguous. It was normal for him to turn a blind eye to it. As for the other guardians, regardless of whether the guardians of the southern heavenly gate were the 4 heavenly kings or the mighty miracle god, the monkey still had the ability to break through. Furthermore, after breaking through the southern heavenly gate, the monkey had sneaked all the way, and was only intercepted outside the Lingxiao Palace. There was no uproar in heaven at all. Because of the investiture of the gods, there was the investiture of the gods' cataclysm. Countless people who faced the investiture of the gods died on the investiture of the gods' cataclysm, which led to the heavenly court. However, before Haotian's celestial court, there was another celestial court in the untainted world, which was established by the East Emperor Tai and Emperor Jun. It was also called the Ancient Celestial Court, the Ancient Demon Court, and the First Celestial Court. At its peak, it regarded the way of heaven as nothing. This also meant that when Emperor Jun and the East Emperor Tai were in charge of the untainted world, Hongjun, Tao Ancestor and the 6 destined sages all had to stand aside. What was more terrifying was that during the ancient demon court, the demon tribe was not the only dominant force. Another force that could compete with the ancient demon court was the 12 ancestors of sorcery, and the ancient sorcerer tribe, which were formed by Pangu's essence and blood. The 12 ancestors of sorcery were the masters of the 12 great ways. When they joined forces to set up the 12 celestial demons formation, they could condense the real body of Pangu, which had the power to destroy the world. As a result, the demon tribe controlled the sky and the sorcerer tribe controlled the land, which almost divided the untainted world into 2. At that time, the ancient demon court had 10 demon commanders, also known as the 10 demon kings and the 10 demon saints. In addition, there was a demon master Kuanpeng, who almost became one of the 6 destined sages. At the peak of the ancient demon court, any one of them was not inferior to the celestial court later. The sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe were so strong that Hongjun had no choice but to use the power of the way of heaven to start the cultivation tribulation of the great war of the sorcerer tribe and the demon tribe. In addition to his series of calculations, he pushed the demon tribe to the bottom of the untainted world, and almost destroyed the sorcerer tribe. If it were not for the protection of Empress Pingxin, who was formed by the primordial spirit of Hutu, who was schemed by Hongjun, the sorcerer tribe would have been completely destroyed. Now before Lin Yuan could figure out what was going on with the ancient demon court in the Tianwu world, he had encountered generals Heng, Ha and Yin Hong, who were listed on the investiture of the gods during the investiture of the gods' tribulation. All kinds of signs were reminding him that the heavenly court of the great desolate world had probably arranged many hidden hands in the Tianwu world, waiting to plot against him. It was hard to say what the background of the Wu family head and his gang, who claimed to be suppressed by Lei Qiuxing, were. But somehow Lin Yuan felt that this gang had something to do with the celestial court of the untainted world. So who is it? Lin Yuan closed his eyes slightly and quickly calculated in his mind. He went through the existence of the heavenly court god system one by one, but he still couldn't find any clues. At the very least, the information he had at hand couldn't confirm that the other party was related to the heavenly court, let alone analyze who the big boss of the heavenly court behind them was through this information. For the time being, Sanqing and Sanqing's disciples could be ruled out. Lin Yuan really did not believe that sect master Tong Tian would plot against Hongjun, and Taishang Dao ancestor would fall out with him directly. Only the primeval Lord of Heaven would be able to watch from the side. The main reason was that the primeval Lord of Heaven was not an honest person. Yinshang. Suddenly, a light flashed in Lin Yuan's mind. In the investiture of God's cataclysm, there were not only disciples of the 3 religions who were on the list of gods. Not to mention generals like Heng and Ha in the mortal world, there were many people in the royal family of Yinshang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods. To be precise, there were many people in the royal family of Yinshang who were forcibly sent to the list of gods. To be precise, Jichang and GFA did not want to keep these traitors alive. Firstly, their identities would threaten their rule. Secondly, They were officials of Yinshang who had betrayed Dxian. If they were allowed to live and spread the news, it would threaten the ruling position of the Zhou dynasty. Therefore, these traitors were basically killed by Jiangxia and the father and son of the Ji family. After they were killed, they simply fabricated a few false images and bragged about them. Then, they became the loyal people who were killed by the tyrant. Many people said that changing history started from the Tang dynasty. In fact, it was not. Changing history had always been a bad habit of the Confucian sect. As the founder of the Confucian sect, the Zhou dynasty would certainly not lose this skill. For example, Baigan, who had the heart of 7 orifices, had a glorious and positive image in history. In fact, what Baigan did was really inhumane. Chapter 1167. Baigan was a member of the royal family of the Shang dynasty. When Dxian saw Baigan, he had to respectfully call him uncle. When he was young, he did not defeat De and became a loser in the struggle for imperial power. However, the struggle for imperial power at that time was not as cruel as the struggle between father and son and brothers. Therefore, De did not kill Baigan. Instead, he entrusted Baigan with an important task. Baigan was overjoyed at that time, thinking that he had finally killed De. Although he was not young anymore, he could still enjoy the supreme imperial power for the rest of his life. Therefore, he assisted Dxian with the heart of being a powerful minister. However, he did not expect that Dxian was even fiercer than his father. He used women and slaves, personally went to the people to experience the hardships, prepare for war, and expand the territory. It could be said that there was nothing wrong in all aspects. However, Dxian broke the class structure and used a large number of talented people who were born as slaves, directly threatening the status of the aristocrats. In addition, he was strict with the law and emphasized that if the emperor violated the law, he would be punished the same as the common people. Not to mention that the punishment could not be imposed on the scholar officials. It was already good enough that he did not add a level to the crime of knowingly breaking the law. Therefore, Baigan did not do it. Not only did he not become a regent, but he also lost his original power. Therefore, when he knew that Shiqi wanted to rebel, Baigan still flirted with Ji Chang and GFA. When King Zhou went south to expand the territory, and left a large number of elite troops to guard the newly acquired territory, Baigan directly launched an attack signal to Jiangxia. In addition, Dxian never looked at the identity of those who broke the law, not to mention the vassals who had disloyal thoughts. Even those who did not want to be the emperor had to think about whether they would fall into the hands of Dxian if they broke the law. In the Shang dynasty, the emperor was respected and not the king. Compared to the so-called king of Zhou, the emperor of the Shang dynasty could really kill and seize. Therefore, the image of a licentious and tyrannical tyrant appeared vividly on the paper. All the warlords returned to their armies and went straight to Chaoga. They had to rely on a bunch of traitors to barely annihilate Yinshang. After that, they went all the way and killed most of the traitors of Yinshang. Therefore, a series of names such as Baigan, Yinhong, and Yinjiao appeared on the investiture of the gods. It could be considered as an early example of once the cunning hare is killed, the hound is cooked. The reputation of these traitors was as good as it could be. They were better than the traitors who wanted to seize the power of the Shang dynasty and even betray the country. They ate the salary given by Dxian and were loyal to the father and son of the Ji family. They were even given the title of Eternal Loyal Minister. It was even more ridiculous to say that he was licentious and tyrannical. King Zhou only had 3 sons in his life, which were Yinhong, Yinjiao, and Wugang. Ji Chang claimed to have hundreds of sons. Just in Lin Yuan's previous life, there were as many as 17 of them who could testify. Therefore, sometimes one really could not be too serious. When he thought of this, Lin Yuan clearly felt that the light in his mind became clearer. This kind of style that was passable on the surface but liked to play dirty tricks in the dark. Moreover, he could drive Yinhong to the northern frontier. He was afraid that it was really a literati star who did it. At the same time, Baigan, whose god name was called by Lin Yuan, suddenly shivered and looked in the direction of the northern frontier, dumbfounded. Is there something wrong with this Black Jiao's brain? I didn't even show my face, and you still think that I was the one who ordered Inhong to go to the northern frontier to cause trouble for you? Although Baigon was a literati star, he had never been very popular. After all, the Zhou dynasty was chaotic to begin with. After Gfa's death, there was a rebellion among the three eunuchs. After that, the various lords fought and killed each other, and the people fought until their brains were fried. The Spring and Autumn Warring States period was an era where hundreds of schools of thought contended. Although there were hundreds of schools of thought contending in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, Confucianism was never the orthodox school of thought. The three schools of thought were the main schools of thought in the Spring and Autumn Warring States period. In that kind of chaotic era, people did not ask for a literati star, who was talented in literature, to descend to the mortal world. They wanted an all-rounder who could kill enemies on horseback and pacify the country when they dismounted. Liu Bang, who took over the foundation of the Qin dynasty, was known as the ancestor of Confucianism. He was very good at asking others to be saints and playing with double standards. However, he was also a ruthless person who ruled the world with law. Even when he was in decline, he supplemented it with Elder Huang's teachings. Worshipping gods was not popular in the Han dynasty at all. Later on, Emperor Wu of Han dismissed hundreds of schools of thought and only respected Confucianism. However, he was also a scholar with the skin of Confucianism and the bones of Confucianism. Even Liu Che used the teachings of the school of war more than the teachings of Confucianism. In fact, if Confucianism had not proposed the concept of great unification, Emperor Wu of Han would not have cared about this group of hypocrites. During the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, there were countless lords and lords everywhere. Every school of thought could make the country strong and rich. Only Confucianism could be said to be, whoever used it will die. It was only during the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty that Confucianism became popular, especially during the Song dynasty. Even if one had the title of Xiaocai, one would not kneel to an official. This made some gods who were in charge of literary talent very popular. It was also at that time that Baigon's incense flourished. However, it was also thrown aside after a few years. Among the gods of the heavenly court, Baigon could be said to be at the bottom. If it was not for his quick thinking, he really would not be able to command the 5-grain star sovereign, Yin Hong of the fighting division. This time, their group lost Yu Jiang and injured Yin Hong. Even Dxion's fist that contained the will of the human king smashed into the northern frontier. It would definitely not be able to recover in a short time. At this time, if he was caught by Lin Yuan, even if he did not die, he would lose a layer of skin. What a pity. Baigon gently smacked his lips twice. His gaze was as gloomy as water. He murmured, "Although Hamba has been in seclusion for many years, I did not expect his mind to be so clear. You saw through my plan and did not want to be my knife. How can I continue to let you live?" As his voice fell, Baigon had already turned into a ray of light and escaped towards his cave residence. A moment later, a blood-winged black mosquito fell out of the void. Its breath was almost dispirited to the extreme, as if a gust of wind could directly blow it to death. However, Mosquito Doran's gaze was very calm. It swept across the direction that Baigon escaped in, and a thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. He had already escaped from Lin Yuan's control for 3 days, but he still could not think of a way to go. After all, he came here on Hongjuan's orders. If he could not complete the mission, even with the protection of the Taishang Dao ancestor, Hongjun could make him suffer a fate worse than death. However, against that extremely strange Black Jiao, he felt that he really did not have much chance of winning. Chapter 1170. The Black Jiao of the Northern Frontier, or simply the Northern Frontier, could be said to have a reputation. However, it was only a reputation. Even the Heavenly Martial World's overlord, the guardian of the Heavenly Martial World, had people like Wei Li and Lin Yuan as enemies, let alone the Northern Frontier, whose overall strength was slightly stronger than the other empires, but was still some distance away from becoming a first-rate force. The Southern Demonic Beast Range couldn't be compared to the Hengduan Mountain Range and the Endless Sea. However, with the Southern Demonic Beast Venerable holding the fort, it could be said to have suppressed the Qinjiang Empire and the Qian Empire for many years. In terms of military strength, the Qinjiang Empire directly gave up on resisting the southern demonic beast range, and the Qian Empire's trump card, the Qian Tiger soldiers, had even put in 120% of their energy to keep an eye on the southern demonic beast range. In terms of economic strength, they had also been using the gold squandering den and the Qinjiang Empire to harvest all kinds of resources from the Qian Empire and the Qinjiang Empire. Perhaps the southern demonic beast range couldn't compare to the Xinwu Empire and the Deadwood Empire, but the confidence they had cultivated in the Qinjiang Empire and the Qian Empire made it impossible for them to run away in front of the northern frontier. Furthermore, 11 of the 12 demonic pillars of the southern demonic beast range had come. With such a lineup, it didn't matter who the leader of the northern frontier was. Unless the Black Jiao personally came, they had the confidence to put up a fight. Taking a step back, if the Black Jiao personally came, they could just turn around and leave. Because that way, their strategic goal would have been successfully achieved. The relationship between the southern demonic beast range and the northern frontier could be said to be like fire and water. It wasn't that the gold squandering den and the Qian village couldn't enter the northern frontier to harvest resources, but the southern demonic beast range's previous actions were equivalent to declaring war on the northern frontier. The relationship between the two sides had reached a point where only one side would be able to rest. Perhaps there was still room for discussion before, but after the Hengduan mountain range incident, the Black Jiao had already announced that even if their Lord Demon Venerable was willing to lower himself to mend the relationship with the northern frontier, with the Black Jiao's temper, he would flip the table. There weren't many people in the world who were fools. The northern frontier's current strategy, but after the other empires saw the northern frontier and empire's confrontation with the Deadwood Empire, they would definitely relax their guard against the northern frontier. This was a very reasonable thing. No one demonic beast range had the northern frontier. Therefore, when the northern frontier restricted themselves, they would only be happy to see it happen. Perhaps only the Deadwood Empire would be unhappy. What the southern wilderness demonic beast range did was to force the northern frontier to give up on the most difficult path and attack the Qinjiang Empire and the Qian Empire, which were easier to take down. As for how to make the northern frontier change their strategy, it was very simple. Harass. As long as they provoked the northern frontier would definitely mobilize a large-scale army, high-level cultivators, and demonic beasts to fight back. However, once things developed to this stage, it would be very difficult for the northern frontier to turn around and attack the Deadwood Empire. This was because war was a battle of resources. Food, equipment, and population were all necessary factors. No one doubted that the northern frontier's wealth could support one or two nation-destroying wars. No one even doubted that the northern frontier had enough resources to completely destroy the empires. However, it would undoubtedly take a lot of time to turn these resources into cash. Starting a war with the Deadwood Empire at the northern frontier was actually the best decision. First, it was to restrict him as much as possible so that the other empires would let down their guard against the northern territory. But strictly speaking, the Withered Tree Empire was a bone that he had to gnaw on, and it was already tough enough now. If he left the Withered Tree Empire for last, who knew how powerful the Withered Tree Empire would become after absorbing the remnants of the other empires that had failed? Second, after starting a war with the Deadwood Empire, the rhythm of the northern frontier's war would definitely change from a blitzkrieg to a protracted war. Without a few years of effort, they would not be able to devour the Deadwood Empire. Even if they did, it would take a lot of time to digest the remnants of the previous dynasty and deal with the local sects and clans. Just like Lei Qiuxing, who had established his country for decades, he still could not completely wipe out the remnants of the Jiao clan. What Lin Yuan wanted to do was even more extreme. He did not want to devour the previous dynasty's imperial family. Instead, he wanted to suppress all the clans and wipe out all the sects. Once they entered a protracted war, the northern frontier would have an endless supply of soldiers and all kinds of resources. After completely devouring the Deadwood Empire, they would turn around and attack the other empires. Although it was not as simple as an adult beating up a child, it would greatly reduce the difficulty. What the Southern Wastelands demon vein was doing now was to forcefully drag the northern frontier into a blitzkrieg, forcing the northern frontier to devour the Azure River Empire and the Deadwood Empire. Then, they would become the public enemy of all the empires in the Tianwu world. At that time, it would be much easier for them to form an alliance to suppress the northern frontier. In any case, I will not retreat. Yushi looked at Fei Xian with disdain and said coldly, "If that Black Jiao is willing to play, I will play with him until the end. Let's see what kind of almighty being that Black Jiao is." First he killed third brother, then he plotted against a demon venerable. Yushi rolled his eyes and looked at Chenyu. His expression was somewhat unsightly. Although the Southern Wasteland's 12 demon pillars was a collective name, it did not mean that they were all as close as brothers. On the contrary, the Southern Wasteland's 12 demon pillars were divided into various groups due to their different personalities and territories. Not only were their relationships not harmonious, there were even a few demon pillars who had personal grudges against each other. Fei Xian knew how powerful the northern frontier was, so he was not willing to fight head-on with the northern frontier. However, Yushi was different. Whether it was in terms of ability or personality, Yushi was a hawk through and through. Previously, when the Black Jiao suddenly attacked the Rising Cloud Empire, it was Yushi's doing. Later on, the Rising Cloud Empire stabilized and did not continue to be encroached upon by Yushi. However, it was an indisputable fact that the Rising Cloud Empire had been ruthlessly bitten off a piece of meat. However, to a dove like Fei Xian who valued harmony, Yushi's actions were undoubtedly self-destructive. After all, although the Rising Cloud Empire had established the Rising Cloud Tiger Soldiers to guard against the Southern Wasteland's demon vein, in reality, the relationship between the two parties had always been good. Otherwise, the Southern Wasteland's demon venerable would not have been able to request the Rising Cloud Tiger Soldiers to attack the Northern Frontier's army. However, Yushi took advantage of the Black Jiao's attack to destroy the Rising Cloud Empire's imperial court and the demon venerable's seclusion to recuperate. He did not even discuss with them in advance and privately mobilized his troops to attack the Rising Cloud Empire. The subsequent Southern Wastelands Demon Vein's military forces were all contributed by the other demon pillars when they knew that the relationship between the two parties was irreparable. However, in the end, the only one who attempted to annex the Rising Cloud Empire was Yushi alone. Chapter 1171. It was the same for the Qian dynasty. And it was the same for the northern frontier? Although Fei Xian had opinions about the Qian dynasty, he would not voice them out directly. This was because there was no right or wrong in this world. The one with the bigger fist was the reason. This time, the Qian dynasty was almost completely annihilated. It was normal for the southern wilderness demon range to take a bite out of them, but what about the northern frontier? For some reason, the sky demon did not provoke the northern frontier at all. Instead, he wandered around the empty south and eliminated the sects and clans that had the strength to take root in the south of the Xinwu dynasty. From a strategic point of view, the sky demon's actions were completely for the northern frontier. When the northern frontier turned around and devoured the sky demon, they could smoothly take over the entire Xinwu dynasty's territory. Moreover, there would not be a second voice that would hinder the development of the northern frontier. Under such circumstances, the northern frontier had quelled the chaos in the Hengduan Mountains and forced the Shuangjian dynasty to a dead end. It was a complete victory. With this victory, no matter who the northern frontier faced next, they would definitely be irresistible in the early stages. What was the difference between provoking the northern frontier at this time and courting death? Even if they provoked the northern frontier for the sake of a strategic victory, anyone with a discerning eye would know that it was just an excuse. Everyone knew that once the northern frontier went west, they would definitely devour the Qinjiang dynasty and the Qian dynasty to minimize their future enemies. How could the southern wilderness demon range that was sandwiched between the two dynasties be spared? Not to mention that it was the southern wilderness demon range that was provoking the northern frontier this time. Fei Xian could not comment on the strategic layout of the southern wilderness demon range. However, he knew very well that once he did that, the southern wilderness demon range would definitely be destroyed. Idiots like Yushi probably thought that it was the demon venerable's confidence, and most likely wanted to bite off a piece of meat from the northern frontier. However, they never thought that with the demon venerable's strength, he could go anywhere he wanted. Whether it was the Hengduan Mountains or the Endless Sea, he could live very well. But what about them? They were just a bunch of ordinary demonic beasts. Even if the 12 demonic pillars were at the demonic king realm, after offending the Black Flood Dragon, the Endless Sea and the Hengduan Mountain Range would be benevolent if they didn't help the Black Flood Dragon. As for the other human empires, there was no place for demonic beasts like them. Fei Xian stared at Yushi with a gloomy face and said coldly, "Invincible. You really dared to say that. Don't you know how to think before you open your mouth? If the northern frontier really invades the west, the Qingjiang Empire and the Qian Empire will definitely perish. How can we, the southern wilderness, be spared? With just the 11 of us demon kings, do you expect the demon venerable to defeat the Black Jiao?" At the same time, the 12th Ji Qian, who was the youngest of the 12 demon pillars, also said, "Lord Demon Venerable defeated the Black Jiao? Ha! If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then he wouldn't force the northern frontier to attack us. To put it bluntly, Lord Demon Venerable just wants to drag the northern frontier down with him. If Lord Demon Venerable really has such ability, then why not take advantage of the northern frontier and the Withered Wood Empire to lead us to backstab the northern frontier?" At this point he paused and added, "Of course, what I'm saying is that even if the southern wilderness and the northern frontier perish together, our Lord Demon Venerable's strength is still there. Without the southern wilderness, he can still live comfortably. There were never so many fools in the world. When you treat others as fools, then you are the real fool." Now, the Demon Venerable clearly wanted to give up on the southern wilderness and drag the northern frontier down with him. At this juncture, their Lord Demon Venerable was in seclusion recuperating. It was obvious that he did not want to get involved. When the northern frontier got angry, they would all be abandoned. 12, you think so too? Yushi glared at Ji Qian fiercely and growled, "I don't know what's so great about that Black Jiao to make all of you so afraid. Yes, I admit that the northern frontier is developing very quickly, but the northern frontier might not be able to defeat us southern wilderness. Why are all of you so pessimistic before the war even starts?" Fei Xian sneered and said, "It's not that we're afraid, it's that you're too stupid. You didn't see clearly what kind of trap was hidden behind this matter. Only you foolishly jumped into it." Yushi's eyes turned cold. The killing intent on his body suddenly skyrocketed. Bang! Chunyu suddenly slammed the table heavily. He glanced at Yushi, Fei Xian, and Ji Qian's faces and said, "I understand what you mean. Stop arguing." Chunyu looked like he was playing the peacemaker, but in fact, his actions were no different from declaring his position. Because the southern wilderness army was still attacking the northern frontier, and the 12 Fei pillars were still here. Chunyu's words were to shut Fei Xian and Ji Qian up. "Boss," but Fei Xian stared at Chunyu, unwilling to give up. Chunyu narrowed his eyes and coldly interrupted Fei Xian's words. "You're right. The Demon Venerable is using us and the southern wilderness as pawns to fight the northern frontier. Yushi really believed that we could defeat the northern frontier. That's really stupid. But then again, aren't you and Ji Qian just as stupid?" Fei Xian and Ji Qian looked at each other. They didn't quite understand what Chunyu meant. Since they already knew that the Demon Venerable was going to use them as pawns, were they still going to follow the Demon Venerable's wishes? It was wrong to do so, so how could it be wrong not to do so? Chunyu sighed and said helplessly, "Don't forget that we're still the 12 Fei pillars of the southern wilderness. Above us are the Demon Venerables. If you quit now, yes, you can make the northern region ignore us. But do you think you can protect the southern wasteland demon veins just like that? Why do all of you think that the Demon Venerable is already dead?" Chunyu's words froze the atmosphere. Thinking about it this way, it was really wrong to do or not to do it. If they didn't provoke the northern frontier wouldn't attack them now. But how would they explain it to the Demon Venerable when they returned? The Demon Venerable's strength was there for all to see. Not to mention Fei Xian and Ji Qian, even the 12 Fei pillars. Oh, now it's the 11 Fei pillars. They might not be able to defeat the demon Venerable even if they fought together. Then aren't we dead meat? Minyu, the fifth-ranked Fey pillar, asked with a trembling voice. Instantly, all the Fey pillars fell silent. It was as if no one dared to face this bloody question. Should they choose to live a little longer or die immediately? How could they solve such a question? Chapter 1172. Chunyu narrowed his eyes slightly. He glanced at the despairing demon pillars and sighed once more. He could not help but feel disappointed. After all, it was not a good experience to be teammates with a bunch of pigs. After a moment of silence, Chunyu said slowly, "You can't say that. With our current position, it's true that we'll die whether we do it or not. But what if we change our position? Everyone here is a demon king. Even in the northern frontier, we'll be strong. If we join the northern frontier Black Jiao and get accepted, we'll win this game." What kind of joke is this? Yushi suddenly stood up in a somewhat irritable manner and roared. Submit to that black flood dragon? Boss, do you know what you're saying? Even if we're willing to join, that Black Jiao has to be willing to accept us. What we're doing now, isn't it just forcing the northern frontier to die? If you want to join the northern frontier now, isn't it just a matter of time before we die? Ji Qian's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of understanding, and he said with a bright idea, "I understand. I get it. Boss, you can actually win this game. Amazing." Chunyu's plan was not complicated. Therefore, Ji Qian understood Chunyu's warning after a moment of deduction. They were now on the side of the 12 demon pillars of the southern wasteland, so they naturally had to work for the southern wasteland demon range. Whether they were willing or not, it could even be said that the demon Venerable was actually aware of their plans. However, as long as they did not immediately surrender to the northern region, the demon Venerable could not possibly deal with them now. This was because everyone would have the idea of surrendering to the enemy at a critical moment. It was just that some people did it, while others gave up on the idea in an instant and kept spurning it. Thinking of betraying and actually betraying were two completely different concepts. As for whether they would join the northern frontier, that would depend on how the northern frontier handled this matter. If the northern frontier could hold back their anger and continue with their previous strategy, the southern wilderness demon mountain range would gain some advantage in the short term. However, in the near future, the northern frontier would definitely defeat the southern wilderness. Under such circumstances, if the 11 demon pillars were to join the northern region, it would be equivalent to standing on the side of the victor. Even if they would have some negative labels on them, the chances of the northern region accepting them at this time was undoubtedly very high. What would happen in the future could be dealt with in the future, but whether or not they could survive now depended on this move. Shallow. It was simply too shallow. At this moment, Ji Qian could not help but despise his previous plan. No wonder Boss sighed. On the other side, in the prince's mansion of the northern frontier, Lin Yuan saw the anxious Zhao Guangchong. He grinned and said, "I already know your purpose. Li Zhong's idea is my idea. When you go back, prepare to build your army in the west. I will personally supervise the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Works to fulfill the conditions that Li Zhong promised you." "No, teacher." Zhao Guangchong looked more and more anxious. He said with threatening gestures, "The west is really in a mess now. There are constant killings every day. Outside the city, there are killings between the Northern Battlefront Army and the Southern Wilderness Demon Army. Inside the city, there are killings between the Gold Squandering Cave, the Gentle Village, and the Demon Emperor Association. Every day at dawn, we have to deal with at least 1,000 corpses. Moreover, the Southern Wilderness has been making a lot of moves recently. The killings between the two sides are getting more and more intense. If we don't have enough power to kill them directly, the Demon Emperor and the Imperial Brocade Guards will not be able to cover this up." Now that the northern frontier had dealt with the Hengduan mountain range and the Shuangjian dynasty, those who were hiding in the dark gradually stopped. If the news that the southern wilderness kept harassing the northern frontier was spread out, these people would definitely be active again. At that time, the northern frontier would be dragged into the quagmire again. The conditions that Li Zhong promised? That was not even enough to fill the gap between the teeth. Lin Yuan looked at Zhao Guangcheng with a smile, as if he didn't realize the seriousness of this matter at all. After a while, Lin Yuan said, "We are clear about this matter. We know how to deal with it. Trust me. Just do as Li Zhong said. It won't be long before you get a group of strong reinforcements. Then just guard the door of the northern frontier well." Strong reinforcements. Zhao Guangcheng's breathing became a little faster. He couldn't understand Lin Yuan's meaning at all. After all, the situation of the northern frontier was right there. Li Zhong would definitely fulfill the conditions that he promised him. However, those things that Li Zhong didn't agree to, Li Zhong wouldn't do anything either. Then where would the strong reinforcements come from? However, as a member of the first batch of the Blackwater Army, and the lieutenant who had the best development in the Blackwater Army, Zhao Guangcheng naturally saluted Lin Yuan with a northern frontier military salute. His anxious expression eased a lot as he walked out of the door. Even so, Zhao Guangcheng was still thinking, where did the strong reinforcements come from? Qinjiang dynasty? Impossible. The Qinjiang dynasty could be said to be in a terrible fix. The Baixing Navy had to patrol the Wei River constantly to guard against the sky demons' attacks and the demonic beasts that were causing trouble along the Wei River. They also had to snipe the refugees who tried to escape into the Qinjiang dynasty. Who knew how many northern frontier agents and people possessed by the sky demon were among them? The other armies of the Qinjiang dynasty couldn't be counted on. The Yunmeng Navy, which was as famous as the Baixing Navy, had to guard against the southern wilderness and the Qian dynasty. They even had to keep an eye on the situation in the Hengduan mountain range and the Endless Sea. Compared to the Baixing Navy, the Yunmeng Navy, which was much more low-key, was the foundation of the Qinjiang dynasty. Once something happened to the Yunmeng Navy, the Qinjiang dynasty would be one step away from being destroyed. Other armies? The Qinjiang dynasty didn't have any other armies. The other armies of the Qinjiang dynasty were only slightly stronger than the militia. The Qian dynasty? That was even more impossible. Everyone knew that the Qian dynasty couldn't even fend for themselves now. Not to mention taking the initiative to attack other forces. The new emperor of the Qian dynasty would probably be laughing in his dreams if they could reclaim the territory that the southern wilderness had taken advantage of. The Qian dynasty was not far from being destroyed now. They were only slightly stronger than the Shuangjian dynasty. At least, although their lives weren't in their hands, they could still struggle a little. Whether the Shuangjian dynasty would be destroyed or not depended on whether the northern frontier was willing to lift a hand and let this reckless little brother off. Once the northern frontier wanted to kill them, they wouldn't even have the strength to fight back. As for the matter of strong reinforcements, the more he thought about it, the more impossible it was. However, after Lin Yuan agreed, Zhao Guangcheng actually had an inexplicable confidence. Chapter 1173. After Zhao Guangcheng left, the smile on Lin Yuan's face gradually disappeared, and he regained his indifferent expression. He turned to look at Li Zhong, who was standing not far away, and said in a low voice, "How's the matter with Frost Mirror Khan?" Li Zhong bowed slightly, cupped his hands, and said, "The Reflection Frost dynasty is like a grasshopper after autumn. They won't be able to jump around for long. Both of us are well aware of this. Recently, no Reflection Frost barbarians have tried to break through our defense line. I heard that they've already eaten all their food and warhorses. They've long run out of ammunition and provisions. Those who survive now are all cultivators with good cultivation. Otherwise, we would have to wonder what they're eating." Lin Yuan was silent for a moment, and then he raised his voice slightly and replied, "Tell me something I don't know." Li Zhong's expression turned awkward. He apologized in a low voice and said, "I've already sent a message to the other side. As long as the Frost Kaghan is willing to end his own life, we will let the rest of the people go. I'm guessing that right now, the Frost Kaghan is trying to convince the Frost Kaghan to end his own life. According to the plan, we will throw these people into the Hengduan mountain range and use them as a bargaining chip for the one you think highly of to become the Beast Master. According to Yi Bujie's information, including the heads we have sent over, that one has about a 70% chance of winning. If he loses, It means that he and his tribe did not contribute at all in the plan to massacre the Frost Mirror grassland. As his voice fell, Li Zhong saw Lin Yuan squinting his eyes slightly, and his heart sank. After a while, Lin Yuan said with a dark look, "I don't want to tell you that the king cannot be humiliated, but this situation is not what I want to see. To put it simply, Li Zhong, you have made a very simple matter complicated." Lin Yuan paused, and when he saw Li Zhong's thoughtful expression, he continued, "I don't want to see the officials trying to persuade Frost Mirror Khan to commit suicide. I only care about the result and the resources we have invested. Originally, you could have let those people kill Frost Mirror Khan, and then find an excuse to send them into the Hengduan mountain range. But now, if Frost Mirror Khan is really forced to commit suicide, do you think this king will let them go or not?" Hearing this, Li Zhong's forehead was already covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. There was a difference between letting them go and letting them go. If the cavalry of the Shuangjian dynasty were to be released back to the grassland, their fate would not change. But in Lin Yuan's plan, Silver Thunder's brain was supposed to be counted as part of the calculation, so it would be hard to say who would be the one to blame. As for whether to let them go back to the Frost Mirror grassland, or put them into the Hengduan mountain range for internal digestion, that would depend on whether the Shuangjian barbarian forced Frost Mirror Khan to commit suicide in exchange for their lives, or if Frost Mirror Khan was killed by them. Li Zhong took a deep breath, and a trace of worry flashed across his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Your subordinate is at fault. I thought everything was under control, so I made such a mistake. Please punish me, Dragon King." A mistake of this level was definitely not punishable by death. After all, the lives of those barbarians were in the hands of the northern region, and it was only a momentary lapse of judgment from the northern region. At most, it was just that the northern region did not have the right to do so, and it would cause some criticism. But the northern frontier was, after all, a force guarded by demonic beasts. Some criticism was nothing. But this kind of low-level mistake was not something he, Li Zhong, should have made. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes, and the atmosphere became solemn. After a while he said faintly, "This king has sensed the opportunity to break through. For the next period of time, you will be in charge of all the affairs of the northern frontier. When this king returns from the Endless Sea, I hope everything will go smoothly." "Ah, yes." Li Zhong lowered his head, not daring to look into Lin Yuan's eyes. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. The most important thing was that trust was a very fatal thing. When it existed, the people who trusted you were willing to bet everything that you wouldn't let them down. But when there was a crack in the trust, then all the trust would collapse in a very short time. For example, this time previously, when Master Wu came to look for him, he did not dare to say that he had not been tempted. After all, the current Li Zhong could be said to be the king of the northern region. Even though he had always been very careful to play the role of the puppet king, in the countless sleepless nights he had tossed and turned, he had fantasized more than once how great it would be if all the power now belonged to him alone. Now a great opportunity was in front of him. If he cooperated with those people to kill or expel Lin Yuan, then he, the nominal king of the northern frontier, would become the real king of the northern frontier. But in the end, he still made the most reasonable choice as usual, which was to take the initiative to report this matter to Lin Yuan. He did not hide anything at all, and even speculated that those people were not from the Heavenly Gate Guardians. It seemed that he had gained Lin Yuan's trust. But did Lin Yuan really trust him? In the face of such a temptation, he did not believe that he could remain unmoved until the end. Moreover, if he was in Lin Yuan's position, he would have already started looking for a candidate to be the fourth king of the northern frontier. But now the incident with Frost Mirror Khan was like a signal that he was challenging Lin Yuan's authority. After all, this was not a small matter, because if there was a mistake in the operation, then the plan against the Frost Mirror grassland and the Hengduan mountains would be half lost. Whether Li Zhong's behavior was intentional or not, it would obviously make Lin Yuan unhappy. At this time, Lin Yuan took a step back and handed over the entire northern frontier to him. However, he did not say when he would return. Therefore, Li Zhong could easily deduce that this was a trial for him by Lin Yuan. If he could make up for his mistakes and complete Lin Yuan's plan, or even better, he would be able to keep his life. Otherwise, Lin Yuan should be looking for a candidate to be the fourth king of the northern frontier. It was about time for him to choose a place with good feng shui for himself. Yes. Li Zhong spat out a mouthful of turbid air and said in a loud and clear voice, "This subordinate will definitely look after the north." Lin Yuan replied softly. Li Zhong did not know if it was a psychological effect, but he seemed to see a hint of mockery in Lin Yuan's eyes. Chapter 1174. The next day, early in the morning, Lin Yuan had already set off from the northern frontier, following the Wei River all the way south, towards the endless sea. 3 months had passed. Even if the outer sea demonic beasts and the dragon clan of the Four Seas had a blood feud, they should have finished fighting by now. Even if they had not completely settled their grudges, both sides should not have the energy to continue fighting. Because this was not just a battle for revenge, but a battle that would determine the future overlord of the endless sea. Regardless of whether it was the outer sea demonic beasts or the dragon clan of the Four Seas, it was impossible for them to go all out, or even to the extent of perishing together with the other party. Then, since the war was over, it was time to reap the rewards. Especially in these 3 months, the construction of the city of trade should have been completed. Even if there were still some details missing, it would not affect the business of the city of trade. If he did not take advantage of this time to reap some profits, what was the point of building the city of trade? Of course, even if the war in the endless sea had not ended, Lin Yuan was not worried that he would be dragged into the quagmire. After all, after building the city of trade, Lin Yuan would be able to use the teleportation portal to receive customers from all over the world. He would also be able to connect the trade route between the Sky Martial continent and the endless sea. As long as Lin Yuan was willing, he would be able to obtain the identity of the biggest logistics supplier in the endless sea anytime. At such a juncture, no one would dare to offend him, because with an additional set of resources, the speed of recuperation would increase by a little, and the speed of recuperation would determine when the next war would start or who would lead it. After Lin Yuan left, Li Zhong then sat down on the stone chair in the king's mansion's courtyard with a bitter face, staring at the pond at the side, lost in thought. Facts had proven that if there were rules, there would be loopholes. Even though the Northern Frontier had organizations like the Embroidered Uniform Guards and the Demon Emperor Association, but at the end of the day, they could not be omnipotent. Luo Su was able to hide from the eyes and ears of the Demon Emperor Association, and the Embroidered Uniform Guards to join forces with Lei Fan. If Li Zhong was willing, he could actually do something similar as well. However, it was meaningless to do such a thing because the northern region never belonged to him. The ruthless people who gathered in the northern region weren't here for him either. Most of them had no choice but to flee to the northern region because of their strength, talents, and other reasons. They had offended powerful people in their previous places, and had no choice but to flee to the northern region in order to survive. In the current cultivation world of the Sky Martial world, just by casually asking around, one would know that there were many strong cultivators who had appeared in recent years. But the most outstanding one was still the Black Jiao from the northern frontier. In less than 3 years, the Black Jiao had quickly replaced Kong Xiang as the #1 man. This was something that even the Demon Venerable had not been able to do. After all, the Demon Vein of the southern wasteland was not far from Mount Shaoyi. If the Demon Venerable had not crossed paths with Kong Xiang, that would be strange. So, the ruthless people came to the northern frontier, not only for a stage where they could display their strengths, but more importantly, they wanted to obtain the protection of the northern frontier. Obviously, Li Zhong had no way to protect these strong cultivators who had defected to the northern frontier. When the time came, even if these people did not come out to fight with him for the control of the northern frontier, they would still choose to leave the northern frontier. At that time, without the support of these people, and with the connection to the Hengduan mountain range broken, the northern frontier could really be said to be useless. It would not take long before it returned to the way it was in the hands of the Shenwu dynasty, becoming a desolate land. When his sister thought of this, Li Zhong could not help but sigh. His family's Dragon King was truly a person who could reach the heavens. The current northern frontier was a piece of land that was worth drooling over in everyone's eyes. But only in Lin Yuan's hands did the northern frontier become like this. Once the power of the northern frontier was lost, unless the other party was like Lin Yuan, possessing the identity of a demon beast, valiant strength, and a mysterious background, they would be able to maintain the characteristics of the northern frontier. It was just like how no matter what policies Lin Yuan introduced, the credit would be forcefully given to Li Zhong. Demon beasts were also extremely distrustful of humans. The main reason why the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was able to prosper was because the person in charge of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was Lin Yuan. Otherwise, with the nature of businessmen pursuing profits, they would have already begun to follow the trend of the northern frontier, imitating the model of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, and entering the Hengduan mountain range. But until now, Li Zhong had never heard of any Chamber of Commerce doing the same thing as the northern frontier. After a moment of silence, Li Zhong lightly waved his right hand. A wave of Gang Qi shot out from his palm, directly stirring up the pond beside him. "Your Highness, why did you call for me?" After another 2 breaths of time, a middle-aged man dressed in a long black robe climbed out of the pond. But the strange thing was that there was not a single trace of water on the man's body. Li Zhong's eyes narrowed slightly as he said slowly, "The Dragon King has already left the northern frontier. Before that, he also released Yi Belan and Li Xian. Now the northern frontier looks strong, but anyone with a discerning eye can see that once we start a war with the Deadwood dynasty, the northern frontier will quickly weaken into an empty shell. Those guys will definitely choose that time to stir up trouble. Currently, we do not know much about the enemy, but Lei Fan and Luo Su will definitely be part of the troublemakers. Go and keep a close eye on them. Once they do anything, immediately send a message back." "Yes." The middle-aged man cupped his hands and replied in a deep voice. Without waiting for the middle-aged man to leave, Li Zhong spoke again. "Also get that spy to start working. He must find an excuse to cut off Frost Mirror Khan's head before he collapses mentally and commits suicide. Don't make things difficult for me." This time, the middle-aged man did not agree readily. After a moment of silence, he slowly raised his head and said, "Your Highness, this is not what you promised us. If Frost Mirror Khan dies, the Frost Mirror grassland will be leaderless. When that time comes, the tribes will fight and kill each other. We will not have a chance to enter and harvest. Do you think this is appropriate?" "Fufu." Li Zhong let out a long breath and said with a gloomy face, "The Frost Mirror grassland is a place that the Dragon King has his eyes on. Whether Frost Mirror Khan dies or not, there will be no accidents. Your previous plan is destined to fail. My personal advice to you is to sincerely cooperate with us. In the future, the benefits you will reap will be far greater than what you have now." The middle-aged man was silent for a moment. In the end, he shook his head and said, "You can't even fulfill the benefits you promised us. How can you make us believe in the greater benefits you promised us? If this is all you want to say, then forgive me for taking my leave. We will no longer be involved in the northern frontier." "Huh?" Li Zhong responded to the middle-aged man with a cold laugh. Chapter 1175. Lin Yuan stopped in the middle of the Wei River, his eyes gloomy. After a while, he grinned and sneered. "A bunch of traitors. Do you really think I don't know about your existence? If it wasn't for Jiu Jianxuan's request before he died, I would have killed all of you long ago. The last chance is right here, so do you cherish it?" The middle-aged man's surname was Jiu, but he wasn't from the Jiu Wuying branch. The Shunwu dynasty, which had been established for tens of years, had 2 big branches, Lei Qiuxing and Lei Qiuming. Counting the inheritance of the Lei family, for example Lei Fan, although he had the bloodline of the Lei family, he wasn't a real royal family. He was only slightly stronger than the average nobles, otherwise he wouldn't have been sent to the northern frontier to gain experience and gain merits. In the Wanjian dynasty, which had an even longer history, the Jiu family could be said to be a big family among the big families. Not only did the Jiu family have the bloodline of the Jiu family, but there were also many families that were bestowed with the family name of the emperor after making great contributions. After the fall of the Wanjian dynasty, Although those meritorious officials still had connections with the Jiu family, they all changed back to the family name of their ancestors. The so-called Jiu family was just a general name. If they were to be divided, there were probably no less than 100 families with the surname Jiu. In this chaotic world, it was very normal to place bets separately. However, the remaining members of the Jiu clan did not only want to rely on someone who could become the ruler of the dynasty, they also wanted to rebuild the Wan Swords dynasty and restore their former glory. Jiu Wuying and Lei Fan cooperated to rebuild the Wanjian dynasty. The middle-aged man cooperated with Li Zhong to rebuild the Wanjian dynasty. These people had more or less harmed the interests of the northern frontier. According to Lin Yuan's logic, they should have been sentenced to death. But Jiu Jianxian had contributed to the northern frontier. Before he died, he set out his last wish. Even if Lin Yuan rejected it directly, he still gave these Jiu family members a chance to change. It was just as Li Zhong thought. Lin Yuan had never believed that anyone could replace his position on the northern frontier. If such an existence really appeared, he would only be able to obtain a desolate border. It was true that the northern frontier was his base, but only in his hands would the northern frontier be the northern frontier of today. Therefore, Lin Yuan never believed that anyone could take the northern frontier away from him. At the other side, the middle-aged man frowned slightly. He took half a step back and said in a deep voice, "Your Highness, I don't quite understand what you mean. We all know that the Dragon King is powerful. Since the Frost Mirror grassland is already in the hands of the Dragon King, we won't fight for it. Why is your Highness trying to scare me with a sneer? Bluff you. You're not worthy." Li Zhong's face turned cold. He stared at the middle-aged man with a gloomy face and said coldly, "I'm talking to you nicely. Do you want to fool me? Then I'll make it clear to you. At this juncture, I don't know how many people are watching the northern frontier. There are even people in the dark who have come to me for cooperation. But at this time, the Dragon King has sent Yi Belan and Li Xian away, and handed the northern frontier to me. Do you think that the Dragon King has no idea of your secret tricks at all? And he did this out of trust?" When he spoke up to hear, he paused for a moment before he raised his hand and continued. "If you insist on doing this, then I won't try to persuade you any further. However, when you're about to die, don't forget that I've already done all I can for all of you." Tut! The middle-aged man smacked his lips and suppressed the idea that had just appeared. Because Lin Yuan's series of actions clearly showed that he wanted them to express their attitude. Would they help the northern frontier complete the plan, and then live peacefully in the northern frontier? Or would they continue to do things their own way and wait for Lin Yuan to directly destroy them? Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan had already retracted his gaze and dived into the Wei River. What the middle-aged man's final choice was actually not important, because the moment he stopped, it meant that he had understood the consequences of his choice. At this time, it was up to him. Even if Lin Yuan appeared, he could not change his mind. He only needed to put this matter aside and wait for a result. If they made the wrong choice, Lin Yuan would not hesitate to activate the previous arrangement and directly send these people to hell. On the other hand, Lin Yuan did not mind giving them a chance to integrate into the northern frontier. However, entering the endless sea this time was much easier than the last time. Last time, the Wei River was filled with the Baixing Navy, but now the situation had changed. No matter how powerful the Baixing Navy was, they did not dare to continue blocking the Wei River. This was because since the rise of the northern frontier, the only overlord of the Wei River was no longer the Baixing Navy. Although the Northern Frontier Navy did not have an independent organization, in terms of elite, they were not inferior to the Navy of the Azure River Empire. In addition, with the Sky Demon's occasional harassment, they did not dare to block the entire Wei River. If they became the barrier of the northern frontier for no reason, wouldn't they die in vain? Sneaking along the Wei River, Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. After all, the Wei River was never a peaceful place. In a small section of the water, there could be several clans of aquatic monsters fighting for control. After all, the Baixing Navy's military exploits were here. Zhao Xiang was also a famous general who could fight on the water, like Yan Xingqi and Lei Qiusheng. Him leading the Baixing Navy to patrol the Wei River was more of a deterrent to the Xinwu dynasty. Their real job was to patrol the Wei River, to ensure the balance of the aquatic monster's ecological chain, to protect the living environment of the people along the river, and to ensure that the monsters were not too rampant. However, the Wei River now was like a ghost town. Lin Yuan walked for nearly 100,000 kilometers, but the number of aquatic monsters he saw did not exceed 1,000. After thinking for a while, Lin Yuan smiled and murmured, "It seems that the war in the endless sea is still going on. These monsters have all run to the outer sea and are trying to take root there. Although the Wei River is vast, it is still much smaller than the endless sea. Those monsters from the outer sea have been robbed. It seems that the dragon tribe of the Four Seas is not having a good time." The closer he got to the Frost Mirror grassland, the narrower the Wei River became. On the contrary, the downstream near the territory of the Qingjiang dynasty was the place where the aquatic monsters had to fight for survival. Even in this place, there were not many monsters, which could only mean that they had all entered the endless sea. With such a large number of aquatic monsters entering the endless sea, who knew how many territories of the monsters from the outer sea they had devoured? Moreover, they had not been defeated until now. It could only mean that the monsters from the outer sea did not care about them at all. They were now wholeheartedly fighting the dragon tribe of the Four Seas. Chapter 1176. At that moment, a strange feeling came from the unseen world. Lin Yuan suddenly raised his head and looked towards the west. Countless desolate world creatures were like Lin Yuan. They all turned to look in the direction of the strange movement. No one knew what had just happened, but one thing was for sure. Something incredible had been born. On the endless sea, on a lone island that looked like a lone star, Hamba slowly raised his head. Hitorigami slowly raised his head. His grayish-white eyes trembled slightly. After a long time, he murmured with a hoarse voice, "This world can actually set up the grand formation of heavenly stars. Could it be that the legend is true?" Jimeng. Baize. At that moment, the Tianwu world seemed to tremble. It was broad daylight, but endless starlight sprinkled down from the sky, as if it was going to cover the sky and earth. 365 stars lit up, releasing incomparably resplendent rays of light. In addition, there were over 10,000 slightly dimmed stars revolving around these 365 stars as if they were resonating with each other. Shortly after, streams of star energy descended, instantly enveloping the martial heaven continent and the endless sea. The stars in the sky also began to move along a mysterious trajectory. Great heavenly cycle stars formation. Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of fear as he softly muttered. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation was created by Baize, one of the 10 great demon commanders, during the ancient demon court. Once it was set up, it could cover the sky and earth, instantly separating them into two worlds. Even the flow of time would change. As the saying went, "A day in the sky is a year on earth." This was to describe the profoundness of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. And this was only the most basic use of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. The most terrifying part of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation was its defense. Once it was set up, except for the original Gate of Life, there were no flaws. That was why after the Heavenly Court set up the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation, there were 4 gates of heaven in the north, south, east, and west. Even Taishang and Yuanshi had to go through one of the 4 gates of heaven to enter the Heavenly Court. Such a powerful formation was naturally not something that could be casually set up. First, it required special materials to refine 365 greater heavenly cycle star banners, and 14,800 lesser heavenly cycle star banners. Then it would be arranged with them as the foundation. Among them, each great heavenly cycle star banner had to be a middle-grade spiritual treasure, and the minor heavenly cycle star banner had to be a low-grade spiritual treasure. If they were placed in the system's ranking of treasures, even a minor heavenly cycle star banner would have a rating of B-. The killing blood sword in Ichi Immortal Yu Yuan's hand was almost at this level. It was stronger than a great heavenly cycle star banner alone, but it was still limited. After all, spiritual treasures and magic treasures were not the same thing. Spiritual treasures were existences that surpass magic treasures by a level. Above that, they would reach the level of ultimate treasures. Although spiritual treasures were also divided into innate and acquired treasures, the materials used to set up the formation were not differentiated. Even an ordinary ultimate treasure would not be able to withstand the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation did not exist in the Tianwu world. After all, this formation was created by Baizhe. According to legends, Baizhe was a great demon that knew astronomy and geography. Even among the mythical creatures, Baizhe's knowledge was at the top level. Such a talent was obviously not something that could be nurtured in a small world. Then this Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation was undoubtedly the work of the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. The Great Heavenly Cycle Star banners required by the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation were irreplaceable. The quality and quantity had to meet the standards. For example, if a person's strength exceeded his physical fitness, then every time he punched, it would bring a great burden to his body. He might even die from the backlash. This was the same principle in the art of formations. The more powerful a formation was, the more materials and rituals it required. This was because every time a formation was activated, it would cause damage to the formation itself. To repair it was almost equivalent to setting up a new formation. When choosing materials, the longer the better. After all, no matter how rich one could not waste money like this. Even the richest people in the world did not have the habit of throwing their money into the sea, right? It was hard to say whether the Tianwu world had the materials to make star banners. But even if there were materials, it was impossible for the other party to make so many star banners in such a short time. Even when Hao Yan, who was favored by Hong Jun, established the Heavenly Court, he had used a lot of stock from the ancient demon court when he rebuilt the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. This was because the materials and time required to make enough star banners were unimaginable. If he had to start from scratch, it would be too late by the time he finished. Heaven Emperor. After thinking for a moment, Lin Yuan's eyes suddenly flashed. He had to admit that Hong Jun was indeed steady, accurate, and ruthless. Now that the Tianwu world was about to be repaired, it could be said that the three paths of heaven, earth, and man were indispensable. The position of the human king had not been decided yet, and the god of the underworld was already in Lin Yuan's pocket. Hong Juan's subordinate had actually been able to obtain the position of Heaven Emperor. This made Lin Yuan somewhat interested in this Heaven Emperor, whom he had yet to meet. Lin Yuan was very clear that they were both outsiders. At least he had a physical body from the Tianwu world. Therefore, it was even more difficult for the other party to obtain the position of Heaven Emperor than it was for him. However, the other party had been hiding for so long, and had been secretly plotting all this time. It was obvious that he had already obtained the position of Heaven Emperor. Therefore, this Heaven Emperor was undoubtedly a powerful figure. But why did he set up the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation? Lin Yuan focused his mind and pondered. However, he realized that the other party's actions were like the puzzling behavior of humans. It was hard to understand. The Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation was second to none in terms of its defensive ability. Once the formation was set up, there was no other way in other than the four heavenly gates. No external power could break through the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. During the Great Shaman War, how did the Shaman tribe break through the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation? To put it simply, it was the 12 grand shamans who used a formation to break through the formation. To put it in more detail, it was the 12 grand shamans who used the 12 divine fiends formation to condense Pangu's true body to break through the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation. Pangu's true body was a power that could split the heavens and earth, or even destroy the heavens and earth. To the eldritch wastelands of the Great Thousand Worlds, the great god Pangu, who could break through 10,000 techniques with his power, was not an invincible existence. His power was enough to create chaos in the eldritch wastelands, but it was not enough to destroy the eldritch wastelands. However, if it was the Tianwu world, not to mention the power of the great god Pangu, even if a sage were to descend, he would be able to cause the eldritch wastelands to explode. Then the question was the Great Heavenly Cycle Stars formation unbreakable? Chapter 1177. In the Tianwu world, the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation was truly an unbreakable existence. Even if they could explode with enough power to destroy the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation, the result would be the destruction of the Tianwu world. That would be equivalent to dragging everyone down with them. Rather than calling it breaking the formation, it would be more accurate to call it self-destruction. Of course, if they did not directly break the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation, there would naturally be other ways to break it. For example, if they directly walked into the formation through the 4 heavenly gates, then the defenses outside would naturally become mere decorations. However, the problem was that the 4 heavenly gates were not the weak points of the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation. They were specially made for the deities of the heavenly court to go to work. Correspondingly, the security of the 4 heavenly gates was also extremely terrifying. Just like the one in the Chaos world, other than the southern heavenly gate that was clearly made easy for the monkeys, the other 3 heavenly gates were placed there. It could be said that anyone who tried to barge in would die. Even if a sage tried to barge in, he would probably have a layer of his skin peeled off. When the 2 armies faced off against each other, before they had even clashed, the other side had already withdrawn into their turtle shells and hung up a no-battle sign. What kind of freaking operation was this? Could it be that they wanted to outlast their opponents to death? Lin Yuan's expression suddenly became strange. That was because the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation had another use, which was to change the flow of time. As the saying went, a day in the heavenly court is a year on earth. It was because of the existence of the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation. A year for the deities of the heavenly court was a year for the living beings on earth. Calculating it this way, the deities of the heavenly court were able to send away 1 or 2 generations of mortals in 3 months. Even the most powerful heroes would be as weak as porcelain dolls in the face of time. Once the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation was set up, it could be said to cover the sky and cover the earth. Even the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was unable to pass through the Great Heavenly Cycle star formation. However, what did that matter? What kind of existences were the deities of the heavenly court? They were immortals whose physical bodies had been destroyed, but whose true spirits existed on the investiture of the gods. What they needed was the power of incense. No matter how much spiritual chi they absorbed, it was just a decoration for a pure cultivator of the divine path. Those great chi practitioners who were recorded as immortals did not rely on the power of incense, but they did not live in the heavenly court either. Instead, they went to work and were picked up by special immortal cars. They were treated much better than the workers who crowded buses and rushed to the subway. When they were not on duty, they would stay in the mortal world and cultivate. Moreover, every 3,000 years, the heavenly court would organize a peach banquet to increase the lifespan of these great chi practitioners with spiritual items. Of course, ordinary heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals could only live for 300 to 500 years, even if they were recorded as immortals. Therefore, the peach banquet had nothing to do with these small fries. Could it be that the celestial emperor had set up the heavenly cycle star formation to exhaust them to death? But who could he outlast? The power of incense itself could be converted into any unit of energy, including but not limited to cultivation and lifespan. Those old immortals in the heavenly martial world were using the power of incense to extend their lifespan, which was why they were able to live until now. Of course, this was because they took advantage of the fact that the 3 realms were incomplete. If the netherworld was established, regardless of cultivation or realm, as long as one did not reach the golden immortal realm, the netherworld would have the right to take away one's soul and send it into the cycle of reincarnation. In other words, once Lin Yuan became the netherworld god, the first thing he would do was to kill these bastards who played with life and death, and set the cycle of reincarnation back on its normal path. 3 calamities and 9 disasters, 5 decays of heaven and man? Sorry. The heavenly martial world did not care about this. If the netherworld god said you should die, then you must die. The heavenly cycle star formation was definitely not set up to exhaust us to death. Then, the other party must need an absolutely safe space to carry out some kind of preparation. Lin Yuan's gaze became more and more serious as he muttered, "It is not just to guard against me. The Shangqing Heavenly Venerable and Red Cloud Taoist are also targets that the Celestial Emperor needs to guard against. Because both sides have different standpoints, he is standing on that person's side. His purpose in coming to this world is undoubtedly to kill all of us and remove that person's calamity of death. And that person's calamity of death, currently, is me. Therefore, he is now preparing something that can completely kill me. But it still needs time. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan was silent for a moment, and then he said again, "No, we can't exclude another possibility. The other party has already set up a trap for me, and deliberately set up the heavenly cycle star formation to lure me there. Moreover, this direction is the west of the northern frontier, which means we have to pass through the territories of the Xinjiang Empire, the Chuyuan Empire, and the Demon Mountains of the southern wilderness. According to my character, I will not leave my escape route in the hands of others. Therefore, I must destroy these three forces. This has changed my strategic plan. I want to destroy the northern frontier with me. In the heavenly martial continent, among the 7 empires, the one that ranked second was called Shiqi. At this moment, in the imperial palace of Shiqi, a young man in a white robe embroidered with dragons and purple brocade was sitting on the dragon throne. He looked down at the empty throne room, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, outlining an evil smile on his handsome white face. He seemed to have seen Lin Yuan, who was hesitating countless miles away. The smile on the young man's face grew wider and wider. After a while, a gentle voice sounded in the hall. "Then the right to choose is in your hands again. Do you want to come to Shiqi and fight, or pretend that nothing has happened and bet that I am just bluffing you?" Behind the dragon throne, a figure in a black robe stood. It was Baigan, who had been humiliated by Hanba. Baigan bowed slightly and said with a smile, "His Royal Highness King of Wu has a great foresight." As soon as he placed his piece, he was already in an invincible position. No matter whether the black dragon comes to Shiqi or not, the final result will not change. It's just a matter of dying sooner or later. Humph. King Wu snorted, as if he was not interested in Baigan's compliment. He just glanced at Baigan with a cold face and said in a cold voice, "Don't make a mistake this time. If my elder brother and your inferior plan appears again, I will personally take action and erase your name from the deification list. Even your last trace of true spirit will be obliterated." As soon as he finished speaking, Baigan's movements became slightly stiff, and his face became a little unnatural, because he knew that what King Wu said was not empty talk. If King Wu was angry, he really had the ability to erase his name from the deification list. If it was in the early days of the heavenly court, King Wu would not have such ability, because at that time, the heavenly court was in need of people. In addition, the disciples of the 3 religions all regarded the deification list as a tribulation, and no one was willing to join the heavenly court. Therefore, there was the deification tribulation of the 3 religions, and the dead became the deification list. Chapter 1178. But in the current primordial world, it was really a long story. Ever since the establishment of the heavenly court, the 6 saints of heaven no longer had any opponents in the universe. Tao ancestor Hongjun also merged with the heavenly Tao and completely became the dictator of the primordial world. Therefore, a series of rules came into being. For example, after the 3 sovereigns ruled the world and the 5 emperors ruled the world, the human king could no longer cultivate. Another example was that the Qi refinement cultivators became the only path of cultivation for humans. However, the limit of this path was the level of the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, not to mention the creatures of the primordial world. Even the immortals of the heavenly court were like ants. In such an environment, going to the heavenly court to become a god was not a tribulation, but something that countless Qi refinement cultivators had to pursue for their entire lives. Without Once You Star, there were still thousands of Qi refinement cultivators waiting to fill the position of Once You Star. Compared to the first emperor King Wu of Zhou, the Once You Star did not have much prestige. If King Wu spoke, his deity position would be erased in an instant. After all, he was a loser in the struggle for the throne, and was sent to the god role to make up the numbers. He was a banner that Hongjun had set up in the human world, a representative of the heavenly Tao suppressing the human world. After GFA, other than Yingzheng and a few others, which human king did not call himself the emperor, the disciples of the Confucian sect, who were like lackeys of the heavenly Tao, kept flattering those emperors who tried to reverse history and overthrow the advanced policies. They wanted to restore the rights of Zhou, the well-field system, and other ancient and backward systems. They scolded the real human kings, such as Qin Shi Huang and Han Wu, as tyrants and fatuous rulers. However, to restore the rights of Zhou, there had to be a banner, right? In the primordial world, other than the human kings like the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, who dared not to give the first emperor some face. As for his plan with Bo Yikao, in his opinion, it was indeed a failure of a failure. Because at the beginning he conspired with Bo Yikao to seduce Daji with his handsome appearance, hoping to draw this beautiful demon concubine to the camp of Shiqi. However, he failed in the end. Although this history was changed by the Zhou dynasty as the victor, Daji seduced Bo Yikao because of his handsome appearance, but was rejected by Bo Yikao. She killed him in anger. But in fact, the truth was that Yikao did not have the ability to kill Daji. Yikao did not have the ability to kill Daji at all. But the truth was, Bo Yikao did not have the ability to kill Daji. And Daji did not have had Daji to Daji. But Yikao, Daji seduced Daji was seduced and Daji say was. Wen Xiu, God. Wisdom spilled all over the world, but Baigan was like holding an umbrella. GFA turned his head with slight disdain. A trace of viciousness flashed through his eyes. He said in a cold voice, "Don't let me down, Black Jiao." Baigan did not see the trace of viciousness in GFA's eyes. But Baigan was an immortal who had lived for countless years. In just a few words, he realized GFA's dissatisfaction with him. Moreover, he also noticed something deeper. GFA was not satisfied with being the emperor. Don't forget, the reason why there were wars among the vassal states in the East Zhou dynasty was that Daji's last attack shattered their reverence for the way of heaven. They no longer respected the high and mighty existence. Instead, they worked hard to become the supreme ruler of the world. These vassal kings included GFA. At that time, when Hongjun was powerful, GFA could restrain his ambition and obediently sit on the throne of the first emperor. But now, even the untainted world was not under Hongjuan's control. How could he, who was in the Tianwu world, not show any ambition? Lin Yuan, who was far away in the Wei River, narrowed his eyes slightly. He did not know why, but he felt that someone was spying on him. However, he could not capture the other party's aura. After thinking about it, he felt that the other party was using some kind of magic treasure. That was why this happened. In fact, the reason why the situation in the northern frontier and the Hengduan mountain range was seen by other cultivators was because those cultivators expressed similar wishes. What they saw was broadcast by Lin Yuan using the power of incense. Otherwise, the Heaven Dipper realm and Kongming realm cultivators would not be able to see what happened in the northern frontier. Otherwise, what was the difference between Lin Yuan's hard-earned intelligence organization and taking off his pants to fart? Why would he need to find someone to investigate something that he could see himself? Spying on other existences across countless spacetimes. If one did not use magic treasures, this level of power could only be used by existences who had touched the threshold of gods. If one cultivated to become a god, one did not even need to take the initiative to look. With just a thought, one could receive what one wanted to see. In the world of cultivation, this was called deduction, or being able to calculate with one's fingers. The so-called calculating with one's fingers was just a process of watching. However, after dealing with the trouble in the Hengduan mountain range and the frost mirror grassland in the northern frontier, Lin Yuan took the initiative to cut off the broadcast signal. In addition, with the interference of the system, ordinary existences could not spy on Lin Yuan. At least, the natives of the Tianwu world could not do this. So he wants to see what choice I have made. Lin Yuan's mind turned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. This kind of scheming behind people's backs had always been his favorite thing to do. He did not expect that someone would dare to use it on him. Shaking his head and clearing his mind, Lin Yuan continued to swim in the direction of the endless sea. Lin Yuan did not care about how those people in the dark were scheming. After all, there was a gap in information between the two sides. At the very least, they definitely did not know that Lin Yuan had cultivated the universal scripture and the way of the ancient totem god. Once the heaven and earth were repaired, and the Tianwu world evolved into a medium-class world, Lin Yuan's strength would instantly increase greatly. At least in the Tianwu world, Lin Yuan's battle strength would not be inferior to that of a quasi-sage. Even if the Sky Emperor in the dark had prepared a killing move, it would only be aimed at the current him. When the heaven and earth were repaired, it would be time for the storm to surge. Now that the heaven and earth were about to be repaired, the Sky Emperor could not help but secretly play tricks. First, he sent a small character like the Wu family head to hook up with Li Zhong. Now he did not hesitate to expose himself to divert Lin Yuan's attention to the west. When the heaven and earth were repaired and the supreme treasure appeared, if the Sky Emperor could still hide in his great heavenly cycle star formation, Lin Yuan could only give him a thumbs up. There were not many people who could endure to this extent, but there were definitely some. Moreover, this kind of person would not be sent to the Tianwu world by Hongjun. The Sky Emperor was here to remove Hongjuan's death tribulation, not to compete with Lin Yuan in terms of patience. Chapter 1179. In the Eldritch World. Two elders in spotless white robes sat in front of a chessboard. They stared at the chessboard in front of them seriously. The strange thing was that there was not a single chess piece on the chessboard. However, if one sank his consciousness into it, he would be able to see the mountains and rivers of the Eldritch World, with the world as the chessboard and the common people as the chess pieces. Since Pangu opened the sky, one of them had been sitting on one side of the chessboard. He had been playing the role of the chess player. He played the entire Eldritch World in the palm of his hand. His name was Hongjun. Many people thought that Hongjun suppressed both the Tao of Man and the Tao of Earth by himself, and became the supreme ruler of the Eldritch World. However, Hongjuan's ambition was far more than that. In the mortal world, there was a book written by Wang Bao during the Western Han Dynasty, for scholars on virtue. It was recorded that in the world of Hongjun, what was not happy? The Hongjun here referred to the world of peace and the world of Tao. With just this sentence, Hongjuan's ambition was obvious. He did not simply want to combine with the Tao of Heaven, suppress both the Tao of Man and the Tao of Earth and become the dictator of the Eldritch World. He wanted to replace the position of the Tao of Heaven and become the ruler of the Eldritch World. When that time comes, Hongjuan's every word and action would become an irreversible rule of the Eldritch World. It was not like now. It was just that the other Eldritch World creatures were afraid of Hongjuan's power, and had no choice but to obey the rules set by Hongjun. The Tao of Heaven would naturally not ignore the ambitious Hongjun. Therefore the Grand Supreme successfully became a sage. However, the good corpse incarnation walked around the mortal world. When he left Hanggu Pass, he attracted the purple clouds from the east. He wrote the Tao Te Ching and obtained immeasurable merit. The Grand Supreme even destroyed his position as a sage of the heavenly path, and became an even more powerful sage of the Great Path. He even snatched away Hongjuan's title of Tao Ancestor. The current Hongjun was not worthy of being called Tao Ancestor. At most, he could only call himself the leader of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. However, the Taoist Sect of Wonders was a branch of the Tao. All of this happened right under Hongjuan's nose. However, Grand Supreme only realized it after everything was done. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to see that Grand Supreme was actually a cannon that had been pushed out by the Great Tao. It was specially used to compete with him. If he couldn't defeat the Grand Supreme, he would naturally die. But if he won, he would have the chance to replace the Great Tao, just like when the time was right, he would be one with the heavenly Tao. Therefore, on the other side of the chessboard, there was a position for the Grand Supreme. Haha. I'm afraid teacher has already lost half of this game. The Grand Elder smiled and stroked his beard, which was whiter than his white robe. He was obviously teasing, but there was no sarcasm in his tone. Instead, he seemed to be seriously reminding Hongjun. Hongjun was not annoyed. He smiled and said, "How can a sparrow know the ambition of a swan? But even if it becomes a swan, the overlords of the heavens are still eagles and condors." Hongjun was indeed a little annoyed that GFA did not listen to his orders and tried to become the king of man. However, compared to the big picture, GFA's small actions were like a naughty child throwing a tantrum with his parents. It was not worth mentioning. The three sovereigns were trapped in the fire cloud cave and could not take a single step out. None of the 5 emperors had a good ending. As for the king of man, Yingzheng and Luche, there was no need to talk about them. They were too far away from existences like them. They did not even need to do anything. The Confucian sect in the mortal world could easily make them notorious tyrants. After the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the only king of man that gave Hongjun a headache was actually DXIN. Not to mention a small character like GFA who had to endure and scheme to become the king of man. Even if it was DXIN, didn't he still die in the end? Thinking of DXIN, the smile on Hongjun's face gradually faded. After the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the human path had been completely suppressed by Hongjun. This kind of suppression was so serious that the king of man could not cultivate. He did not want another king of man to revive the human path. However, DXIN, as a mortal, refused the high and mighty prehistoric creatures, and even launched a counterattack against the Xian sect at that time. The final winner of the investiture of the gods was the Zhou dynasty, the Chan sect, and the Ren sect. The foundation of the Shang dynasty was burned to the ground. The king of man, DXIN, did not even have a complete corpse left. However, no one would forget how terrifying that war was. The 3 sects of the Xian sect appeared at the same time. The Western sect was also involved in the catastrophe. Even the mother of man, Niuhua, did not escape. Other than Hongjun, the 6 saints were directly wiped out. Moreover, the Chan sect, the Ren sect, and the Western sect worked together, but did not gain the upper hand in the war. Instead, they were repeatedly injured by the Shang dynasty. In the end, even the saints were forced to personally fight. Under the situation where Niuhua did not dare to make a move, the 4 saints worked together to extinguish the arrogance of the Tongtian sect. Without the help of the disciples of the Jie sect, the Shang dynasty was faced with a large group of traders and various qi refinement cultivators. Even so, DXIN ruthlessly tricked the heavenly Tao before his death. A mortal dynasty, in the end, forced the saints to personally fight for it. It was simple to say, but if one thought about it carefully, one would know how powerful the Shang dynasty was at that time. However, in the Tianwu world, even if GFA had his own little plan, Hongjun was not without people he could use. For example, Baigan and Yin Hong. They were famous existences on the investiture of the gods. No matter where they were, they would be firmly controlled by Hongjun. As long as Hongjun had a thought, they would be like dogs that saw a bone and run over to him. Hongjun suddenly raised his head and stared at the Grand Supreme's face meaningfully. He suddenly remembered that he had sent Mosquito Daoran with the purpose of detonating the karma between Mosquito Daoran and the Tongtian sect, causing a calamity in that small kiliocosm. Perhaps Mosquito Daoran, who was involved in the situation, did not understand, but the Grand Supreme would not be unaware of his plan. Even so, the Grand Supreme still sent Mosquito Daoran with a tough attitude. It was obvious that the Grand Supreme was not on the same side as him. He would not let a disciple who had made great contributions to him to carry out a mission that would definitely lead to death. The scheme behind this was probably very deep. This round is not over yet, teacher. The Grand Supreme still had a smile on his face. However, as if he had thought of something, he directly interrupted Hongjun's thoughts. Yes, this round is not over yet. Hongjun was slightly stunned. A smile appeared on his face again as he softly agreed. The final game had not yet begun. The victory and defeat today was just a simple victory and defeat. It was not a big deal. Chapter 1180. 3 days later. Lin Yuan had already entered the outer sea area. Compared to the endless sea, the current outer sea area could be said to be extremely withered. Nearly 80% of the sea demon clan's encampments could be said to be empty at this moment. There were even some sea demon clans encampments that clearly had the characteristics of aquatic sea demon beasts living in them. They were obviously outsiders who had taken over the nest. This scene couldn't help but make Lin Yuan frown slightly. The war that he had started but didn't participate in. What was the result of it now? The sea demon beasts couldn't have been wiped out, right? This wasn't good news. After all, Lin Yuan was now standing in the endless sea, and had already offended the dragon bloodline demon beasts. The city of trade was a piece of fat meat in their eyes, and they couldn't wait to pounce and take a bite. The reason why the Sea Demon Guild and the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas didn't take action was that Lin Yuan had lured the sea demon beasts into the situation, causing them to have no time to take care of themselves. However, if any of them were wiped out, the position of the Overlord of the Endless Sea would be confirmed in a short time, and the gray-scaled flood dragon people under Lin Yuan's command wouldn't have a place to stand. However, the current situation clearly indicated that the situation of the demon beasts in the outer seas had reached a critical point. Whether it was sea demon beasts or wild beasts, the nest was extremely important. If they stepped into the hunting range, as long as they ran fast enough, they could still survive. However, if they stepped into the nest, even if they ran to the end of the world, they would be chased by the nest owner. 4 sea demon beasts and wild beasts that struggled on the line of life and death every day. The nest was the only safe place. If the nest wasn't safe, then the uneasiness and fear brought by the sense of crisis was enough to make them fall into madness. Now the nests of the sea demon beasts were either abandoned or occupied by outsiders. It seemed that the sea demon beasts hadn't returned here for a long time. However, even if that was the case, there should be some young adults, females and cubs in their nests, right? Or could it be that the outer sea demon beasts had already destroyed the dragon clan of the Four Seas, so they had moved to the inner sea? With an uneasy feeling, Lin Yuan continued to swim forward. However, Lin Yuan was not optimistic about the future of the demon beasts that had taken the opportunity to enter the endless sea. After all, the sea was completely different from the land, rivers and lakes. Even if these demon beasts could ignore the difference in water quality, they might not be able to survive in the endless sea. The sea beasts in the endless sea might not have the same intelligence as the demon beasts, nor could they cultivate by themselves. However, their size, strength, and speed were not something that the wild beasts could compare with. Lin Yuan had once seen a giant octopus that was more than 10,000 feet long. If it was placed in his previous world, it would be enough to be called a monster. Even if many demon beasts revealed their true form, they might not be able to be compared with it. However, that octopus was just an ordinary sea beast, and was still 108,000 miles away from becoming a demon beast. Lin Yuan had no doubt that once that octopus cultivated into a demon beast, it would have the battle prowess comparable to a demon king. This giant octopus was not an exception in the endless sea. It should be said that most of the sea beasts had a similar level of terror, especially when one was close to the deep sea region. The sea beasts there were even more terrifying. Even a demon king could fall in the hands of the sea beasts. Compared to the endless sea, the Sky Martial continent was simply a paradise. Another half a month passed. Lin Yuan came from the outer sea region of the endless sea to the Willowstone Great Wall that bordered the deep sea region. At this time, Lin Yuan finally saw the demon beasts that truly belonged to the endless sea. Most of the outer sea demon beasts were gathered here, occupying the original Willowstone Great Wall. Occasionally, one could see their young swimming around, as if the Willowstone Great Wall was their nest. It seems that the war has ended. Neither side gained any benefits, and their anger is getting worse. Lin Yuan looked at the Willowstone Great Wall that was crawling with demon beasts with a strange expression and whispered softly. These outer sea demon beasts seem to have gained an advantage. Although they gave up their original territory, they occupied the Willowstone Great Wall. Lin Yuan could also see some demon beasts busily rebuilding the Willowstone Great Wall. It seemed that they intended to turn the dragon bloodline demon beasts that had spent a lot of money to build the Willowstone Great Wall into something that belonged to them. This was not surprising. After all, if it were not for Lin Yuan's intervention, most of these outer sea demon beasts would have died before they could take down the Willowstone Great Wall. Then they would have to face the dragon bloodline demon beasts that were at their peak. In the countless years of hatred between the Outer Sea demon beasts and the dragon bloodline demon beasts, it was precisely because of the existence of the Willowstone Great Wall that the Outer Sea demon beasts did not even have the ability to take the initiative to attack. Now that they had taken over the Willowstone Great Wall, if they did not do something, it would be truly confusing. The Eye of God opened. 160 miles away was the dragon bloodline demon beasts camp. However, one belonged to the Sea Demon Guild, and the other belonged to the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. The two camps were clearly separated. Obviously, something had happened that caused the two groups of people who had originally joined forces to completely fall apart. Now their purpose here was not to drive the Outer Sea demon beasts back to their territory, but to prevent the Outer Sea demon beasts from taking a step further. In fact, these two groups of people were also on guard against each other. That's true. Lin Yuan shook his head with a chuckle. Although he did not know the background of the Outer Sea demon beasts, he was still clear about the background of the dragon bloodline demon beasts. Even if they had been slaughtered by the existence that was also the host, they should be far stronger than the Outer Sea demon beasts. If they had such a big advantage, it seemed that there was no other reason other than internal strife to explain why they could not defeat the Outer Sea demon beasts. However, why would the dragon bloodline demon beasts fight among themselves? Whether it was the dragon gods of the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, or the great demons of the other clans, none of them would be stupid enough to engage in internal strife in the face of a great enemy. After all, the nature of the Outer Sea demon beasts attacking the deep sea region was completely different from the nature of Lin Yuan, a businessman, who took the opportunity to establish himself in the endless sea. With a few flashes of his body, Lin Yuan had already arrived at the foot of the Great Wall of Willows. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to speak, countless bloodthirsty gazes stared at Lin Yuan. After all, when the pure bloodline of the Flood Dragon's body was revealed, these demonic beasts from the Outer Sea, who were extremely hostile to dragon blood demonic beasts, did not directly attack him. It could be said that they were very polite. "Welcome, Dragon King. Sorry for not coming out to greet you." A loud voice sounded from the Great Wall of Lushur. Lin Yuan raised his head and saw a human stepping on the wall, staring at Lin Yuan condescendingly. His black and white eyes were shining with an inexplicable luster. Lin Yuan slightly narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "This king doesn't like to talk with his head raised, and he doesn't like to be looked down at. Are you sure you want to talk to this king in this manner?" Chapter 1181. The mutant standing on the Great Wall of Willows was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly said, "The Dragon King entered the endless sea without saying a word. I'm afraid he has other plans. If that's the case, I hope the Dragon King can tell me the purpose of this trip. Otherwise, I'm afraid I can't make things easy for the Dragon King." The mutant had personally experienced the horror of the Black Jiao. With a force far weaker than that of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, he had repeatedly defeated the sea area set up by the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. In the end, he had completely separated the Great Wall of Willows from the sea area controlled by the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. The Great Wall of Willows, which the dragon bloodline demonic beasts had relied on, had become a coffin to bury them. Now that the Black Jiao had entered the endless sea again, once he stood on the side of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts, it would be a fatal blow to them. "Is it up to you to make things easy or not?" Lin Yuan's narrowed eyes slowly opened. His aura began to rise. He said coldly, "It seems that you don't understand what this king means. Well, since you want to be high and mighty, this king will personally drag you down. How dare you? How dare you? You're courting death." Before the mutant could reply, countless Outer Sea demonic beasts roared. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced on Lin Yuan. However, ordinary sea demonic beasts were as weak as a joke to Lin Yuan. Before they could even get within 100 meters of Lin Yuan, they had already turned into ice sculptures. Some of them didn't even have a complete corpse left. They were directly crushed into minced meat by the sudden increase in pressure of the water current. However, these were just ordinary Outer Sea demonic beasts. Neither the mutant nor his subordinates, such as Mo Ta, had any intention of joining the fight. The Black Jiao's invincible aura was there for all to see. Apart from a few small fries who didn't know the difference between life and death, these people who were at the same level as the Black Jiao, or even higher, only had a deep sense of reverence for the Black Jiao. They didn't dare to fight with the Black Jiao at all, because the slightest carelessness could cause their hundreds or even thousands of years of cultivation to be destroyed in a single day. As expected of the Dragon King of the northern frontier, who defeated the southern wasteland, slaughtered the Yun nation, and extinguished the Frost Mirror. Pa, pa, pa. The strange man said flattering words, and at the same time he gently clapped his hands. However, his eyes were extremely cold as he coldly said, "However, you dare to touch this monarch's subordinates. Do you think this monarch is made of mud?" No one doubted that the mutant's methods and heart were ruthless enough. In a sense, the mutant had done something similar to Lin Yuan. Moreover, compared to Lin Yuan, who had conquered the northern frontier as a demonic beast and ruled over the human race, the mutant had mixed with the outer sea demonic beasts, until now and become the leader of a sea demon force. The difficulty of this was only higher. Because Lin Yuan's predecessor was originally a human, he was very clear about the weaknesses of human beings, and also knew how to communicate with them. Coupled with the experience brought by the information explosion era, and the help of the system, it was only natural that Lin Yuan could do what he did now. Otherwise, he would be called incompetent. However, although demonic beasts were also intelligent life forms, they were ultimately different from humans. A human cub mixed with a group of demonic beasts slowly grew, became stronger, and then reached his current position. In the series of events that he experienced, if there was a slight mistake, he would immediately become food in the stomach of a demonic beast. However, so what? No matter how lucky a player was, if he encountered a cheat, he would only be a delivery man. Lin Yuan's real cultivation level was lower than the mutant's by a large realm, but after all, he was still a cheat who could use the power of incense. As for whether the mutant could use the power of incense or not, it didn't matter. After all, accumulating the power of incense was a painstaking effort. Even if the mutant used up all his wealth, he might not be able to compete with Lin Yuan. What's more, including the mutant, there was no native in the Tianwu continent who dared to squander the power of incense like Lin Yuan. In their eyes, incense was something that could prolong their lives. Whether you are a pushover or not, what does it have to do with this king? This king will give you one last chance. Either you let go of the road, or... Lin Yuan tilted his head slightly and turned his gaze in another direction. He grinned viciously and said, "God worship sect Ingzai?" The water dragon form with wings on its back paused slightly, as if it didn't expect Lin Yuan to recognize it. After a moment, the water dragon form shook and transformed into a young man in a black robe. However, the young man's face was still covered with scales, and his body faintly emitted the smell of a snake. It was a typical appearance of a demonic beast who was in the process of transforming, but had not yet completed. If it was in the Eldritch world, most of these demonic beasts who had transformed would hide in their own caves to cultivate. This was because transforming was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for demonic beasts. If they encountered some kind of strong stimulation, the transformation process would be interrupted, and they would be frozen forever. This Ingzai was obviously in the transformation stage, but he still came out to stir up trouble. A cold light flashed in Lin Yuan's eyes, and he took a few steps towards Ingzai. As expected, seeing the fierce light in Lin Yuan's eyes, Ingzai couldn't help but show a touch of fear in his eyes. He subconsciously stepped back and raised a hand to signal Lin Yuan to stop. He said with a wry smile, "Dragon King, why are you so angry? I just came to see what kind of conflict there is between the Dragon King and the dissimulated man, and whether it can be mediated." Speaking of this, he turned to look at the dissimulated man and said, "Dissimulated man, this is your fault. No matter what, the Dragon King is one of us. If you have any dissatisfaction, just say it. Why do you have to block the way of the Dragon King?" "Humph." The dissimulated man snorted and stared at Lin Yuan with gloomy eyes. He said in a cold voice, "I didn't stop him. He didn't want to say why he wanted to go to the deep sea area. Can I assume that he went there to help the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas deal with us?" After all, he came here to use us to divert the attention of the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas and the Sea Demon Guild. Now that we have the upper hand, he went there to help the Dragon Bloodline Demon Beast deal with us. By stirring up this pool of water, he can naturally benefit from it. Hearing this, Ingzai showed Lin Yuan an apologetic smile, and then immediately looked at the dissimulated man and said, "If you have something to say, come down first. We are all on the same side. Let's talk it out." Ingzai and the dissimulated man's act of playing the good cop and bad cop, but he didn't say anything. These two were just trying to force him to come down here. If they couldn't come to an agreement, the demon beasts from the outer sea and the ancestor monster of the god worship sect would probably join forces to kill him. "Oh, I'm not going down." The dissimulated man sneered and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He looked at Lin Yuan coldly and said, "This Black Jiao's bloodline is still that of a dragon bloodline demon beast. He helped us because he wanted to save himself. Now that he has entered the endless sea again, who knows which side he is on?" Chapter 1182. Suddenly, Ingzai's face darkened. Because Ingzai also had the bloodline of the Dragon Clan, but its origin was different from that of the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. The dissimulated man also scolded it. Moreover, it had already said so much. Even if one played the good cop and the other played the bad cop, it shouldn't be like this, right? What was the difference between the dissimulated man's behavior and directly flipping the table? Lin Yuan curled up his body and said with a sneer, "Can't you see? You've been fooled. Not only me, but I guess the god worship sect has also been regarded as an enemy by him. Now the one standing behind him is either the guardian of the celestial gate, or..." Speaking of this, Lin Yuan's voice stopped abruptly, and a look of not knowing whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. The celestial emperor's speed was much faster than he had imagined. He didn't even let go of the endless sea. However, to play such a big game at once, wasn't he afraid that he would be stuffed to death? Hearing this, Ingzai's face became a little unnatural. It didn't want Black Jiao to enter the endless sea again, because at this stage of the war, the situation was very clear. As long as the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas and the Sea Demon Guild didn't work together, they would be defeated one by the monsters in the outer sea sooner or later. At that time, the god worship sect could take advantage of the situation and enter. Not only could they harvest the faith of the monsters in the endless sea, but they could also compete for the position of the overlord of the endless sea. But now, it was estimated that Black Jiao wasn't the only one who wanted to enter the game. There was another group of people who had contacted the dissimulated man before Black Jiao, and won the trust of the dissimulated man. Otherwise, the dissimulated man wouldn't have such an attitude at this moment. He didn't even give face to Ingzai. "Black Jiao, we have been waiting for you for a long time under the order of King Wu." A somewhat familiar voice sounded. Soon after, Yin Hong, who was wearing purple gold armor, appeared on the city wall. However, with just a glance, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Last time, Yin Hong had been defeated by him. Although he had killed Yu Jiang, the fist intent left behind by Di Shang in Yin Hong's hand had been completely blocked by Lin Yuan. In a short period of time, Yin Hong probably did not have the courage to find trouble with him. Moreover, Lin Yuan had directly entered the endless sea from the Wei River. It could be said that it was the fastest path. Otherwise, anyone would have to avoid the disaster areas of the Sky Demon. No matter how powerful one's divine ability was, they would not be able to withstand the endless attacks of the Sky Demon. Even if Yin Hong had left first, it would be impossible for him to reach the endless sea before him. This guy was most likely not Yin Hong. If he looked similar to Yin Hong, then he must be Yin Jiao. It was just that he did not know how capable this guardian Tai Sui was. After all, the magic treasures on Yin Hong's body were all imitations. The real magic treasures had been taken away by Qi Jingzi. Moreover, Yin Hong's most powerful magic treasure, the Yin Yang mirror, did not even have an imitation. When faced with Lin Yuan's methods, he could only flee pathetically. But what about Yin Jiao? One had to know that Yin Jiao's master, Guangqingzi, was not simple. In most myths and legends, Guangqingzi was the kind of person who had maxed out his martial strength. Even the sword immortal path, which was number 1 in terms of killing and speed, originated from Guangqingzi. In some records, as one of the 5 emperors, the Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan, had asked Guangqingzi. However, Lin Yuan did not believe this story. After all, the Yellow Emperor was one of the ancient human kings. No matter what he faced, he would not easily bend because these human kings had to fight for a future path for the human race in that dark era. However, in those records, it was written that the Yellow Emperor had asked Guangqingzi. He had knelt on the ground and walked with his knees. He had respectfully come before Guangqingzi and kowtowed twice. Even the heavens and earth could not make a human king bow, let alone an immortal. However, an immortal who dared to lie about the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan and could still live well was very difficult to deal with. As for the heaven-flipping seal, Luo Hunbel, and the male and female swords that Guangqingzi had given to Yin Jiao, which one of them was not a famous treasure. Even if Yin Jiao only had imitations, he would probably be a very difficult existence to deal with. However, this group of people from the heavenly court was indeed dedicated. First, Yin Hong and Yu Jiang went to the northern frontier to find trouble with him. When the matter at the northern frontier came to an end, he actually bumped into Yin Jiao when he came to the Endless Sea. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, "It's really interesting. The eldest son of Dxian, the crown prince of Yin Shang, can actually settle down and be GFA's lackey. I think the biggest failure of Dxian in his life is to have 2 sons, Yu and Yin Hong." As soon as he finished speaking, the aura on Yin Jiao's body suddenly shook. In the next moment, Yin Jiao narrowed his eyes, and his body shook, revealing the body with 3 heads, 3 eyes and 6 arms that he had learned from Guangqingzi. Although he was not an Asura, the terrifying murderous aura on his body was not inferior to that of an Asura. Obviously, Yin Jiao was more than qualified to be the god position of Guardian Tai Sui. Moreover, what was interesting was that if one only looked at the history of the investiture of the gods, the famous Neza and Yang Jian actually had similarities with Yin Jiao. It was not a problem to say that Yin Jiao was the prototype of Neza and Yang Jian. In the records of these two in the literature, it could be said that they had copied Yin Jiao's homework and then added other settings to create a brand new character. After Yin Jiao revealed his body with 3 heads, 3 eyes and 6 arms, he did not stop at all. He directly turned into an afterimage and crashed into Lin Yuan. A pair of male and female swords slid out from his waist like 2 long rainbows. The terrifying sword aura was so terrifying that people could not even look directly at it. As expected of the disciple of the ancestor of sword immortals, Lin Yuan sincerely praised, but there was no trace of panic in his eyes. As a member of the heavenly court, Yin Jiao originally stood on the opposite side of Lin Yuan. In addition to Lin Yuan's provocation, he attacked in anger. His sword aura was vast and majestic. Even when faced with such a sword aura, Lin Yuan felt like he was a small boat floating in the vast ocean, as though he could be overturned by a storm at any time. Tut! Lin Yuan opened his mouth and spat out a syllable. Immediately, the surrounding seawater surged wildly and gathered together. In the blink of an eye, it turned into threads of mysterious ice, forming a large net that enveloped Yin Jiao's sword aura. The sword aura and ice net collided, and biting cold air spread out. Even though the surrounding living desolate demons and Demon King realm great demons were basically all alive, they could not help but shiver in the face of the cold air. They hurriedly circulated their demonic chi to resist it. Otherwise, if they were enveloped in such cold air, even if these demonic beasts had strong bodies, there might be some irreversible side effects left behind. Sizzle! The sword aura and ice net did not give way to each other. At the intersection, there were constantly ear-piercing sounds, as though ice had fallen into a raging fire. 3 breaths later, the ice net that Lin Yuan casually condensed suddenly collapsed under the attack of the sword aura. The ice net was split into 2 from the middle, as though it had been cut by a sharp weapon. After the sword aura passed through, the remaining ice net slowly shattered, turning into ice shards that covered the ground. Chapter 1183. However, even though he won the ice net, the remaining sword chi was already at the end of its tether. It gently brushed past Lin Yuan's face, leaving a shallow white mark on a black scale, and then directly dissipated into nothingness. Yin Jiao immediately stopped his actions and stood still on the great wall of willow stone, but his gaze towards Lin Yuan was clearly filled with fear. As an immortal who had lived for countless years, Yin Jiao was not a small character who had not seen the world. On the contrary, as the god of the heavenly court, Yin Jiao's strength was not inferior to Neza and Yang Jian in the slightest. Therefore, even though this exchange of blows was not over, it allowed him to see how terrifying Lin Yuan was. In order to greet Lin Yuan, Yin Jiao had spent a lot of effort on the sword qi just now. The process of washing, nurturing, and unsheathing took nearly 3 months. However, Lin Yuan's ice net was casually formed, although the exchange of blows between the two sides only lasted for 3 breaths of time. And it seemed that Lin Yuan had suffered a small loss. In fact, both sides knew that Yin Jiao was the loser. Angry out of humiliation? Lin Yuan asked with a fake smile. Without waiting for Yin Jiao to answer, Lin Yuan had already opened his bloody mouth. In an instant, endless biting cold whistled out, and a wisp of white light flew up the great wall of willow stone at a speed almost imperceptible to the naked eye, and fiercely crashed into Yin Jiao's chest. Yin Jiao's body trembled slightly, and the surrounding demonic beasts all looked over. They saw an oval-shaped frost mark on Yin Jiao's chest, and it was constantly spreading in all directions. At this rate, Yin Jiao would be frozen into an ice sculpture on the spot in a few breaths of time. At this moment, the strange man's face suddenly revealed a trace of panic, because he realized that Black Jiao's strength was far beyond his imagination. Yin Jiao, who was originally waiting to ambush the Black Jiao, had actually suffered 2 huge losses at the hands of the Black Jiao. From the looks of it, Yin Jiao was not a match for the Black Jiao. As Yin Jiao's partner, how could he still have a good time after Yin Jiao's defeat? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not follow up with another attack. His current influence was not enough to affect the great desolate world. For example, Yin Hong, Yin Jiao Baigon, and the other famous immortals on the investiture of the gods list could not be killed. Even if he killed them in the Tianwu world, it would not take long for them to reappear in the investiture of the gods list. There were only 2 ways to kill these immortals on the investiture of the gods list. The first way was to cut off their source of incense. After a short period of time, the power of incense would be exhausted, and they would fall into a deep sleep, which was no different from death. If they slept for too long, existences below the golden immortal realm would be destroyed by the 3 calamities and 9 disasters, and the 5 decays of heaven and man. The other way was to control the investiture of the gods list. These immortals with true spirits on the investiture of the gods list had already died long ago. Rather than saying that they were life forms with independent consciousness, it would be better to say that they were just tool spirits condensed by the investiture of the gods list. As long as their names were erased from the investiture of the gods list, their souls would naturally disperse. This was also why being deified by the investiture of the gods list was tantamount to becoming a slave, because their life and death were in the hands of the controller of the investiture of the gods list. Unless they became a saint, they would never be free. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not have the idea of killing Yin Jiao here. It was meaningless to waste his energy. If not for this, Yin Hong would not have been able to leave the northern frontier alive, even if he had been pushed out of Yujiang. With a smile in his eyes, Lin Yuan stepped back slightly and said to Ying Zai, "The next problem is between the sect of gods, the mutant, and this person. I only want to pass through the Great Wall of Willowshire. Do you have any objections?" Hearing this, Ying Zai was silent for a moment, and a hint of fear flashed across his eyes. However, soon he sneered and looked at Yin Jiao's face, which was already covered with a layer of frost. He said in a cold voice, "Dragon King, if you have other things to do, please go first. If we have a chance to meet again in the future, I will definitely treat you well. As for this friend from the heavenly court, let me deal with him." The mutant glanced at Ying Zai and Lin Yuan with a gloomy face. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand and said, "Switch." Although he had long known that the background of the sect of gods was not simple, after all, their ancestors had some ties with the dragon tribe of the 4 seas. Tracing back to the source, It was even more than the hatred between the demon beasts of the outer sea and the dragon tribe of the four seas. However, he had never thought that the background of the sect of gods would be related to the mysterious power behind Black Jiao. Whether it was Lin Yuan, Ing Zai, or Yin Jiao, they were all well aware of the mutants' thoughts. However, compared to the natives of the Tianwu world, whether it was Lin Yuan who had the system or the creatures of the untainted world, their strength, vision, and background were far superior to the mutant. In the world where the Great Era did not appear, the mutant could naturally be called the top people. However, when the Great Era came, the almighty hidden figures would appear. The natives of the Tianwu world, who thought they stood at the top, were just chess pieces that could be discarded at any time. The mutant wanted to take all the advantages. First, he used Lin Yuan to take down the Great Wall of Willowstone. Then, he borrowed the strength of the sect of gods to compete with the dragon tribe of the four seas. Now that the situation was almost in the bag, he joined forces with Yin Jiao from the heavenly court to try to kick the sect of gods out. His basic purpose was nothing more than to provoke the conflict between the sect of gods and the heavenly court, so that he could reap the benefits of the endless sea. However, would things really be as easy as he had expected? Not to mention that Lin Yuan had returned to the endless sea at this time to break the game. Even if Ing Zai and Yin Jiao collided head-on, the one who would be kicked out would only be the mutant, who did not know anything and thought that everything was within his calculations. It was hard to say what the original form of Ing Zai was. It could be a demon body that turned into a dragon, or it could be like Lin Yuan, who came to this world as a soul to possess a demon beast. However, in the untainted world, the surnaming was not a small family. For example, after the Zhou dynasty, the first emperor of Qin dynasty, Ing Zheng, who once again unified the world, was also called the dragon soul of Huaxia, the ancestral dragon. This Ing Zai most likely had something to do with Ing Zheng's branch. Otherwise, Ing Zai would not have taken over the hot potato Yin Jiao. After all, in terms of origin, the ancestor of the Ing family was the general under Dxian, Eli. If it were not for the betrayal of Yin Hong and Yin Jiao, the Shang dynasty would not have been destroyed. For a long time, Eli was even slandered as a villain who only knew how to talk, flatter, and frame others. The descendant of the Ying family met Yin Jiao. This was interesting. Chapter 1184. Lin Yuan did not pay much attention to the matters between Ing Zai, Yin Jiao and the dissimulated man. However, he managed to obtain some interesting information from Yin Jiao. The Heaven Emperor of Tianwu world was actually King Wu of Zhou Gfa. The three sovereigns ruled the world and the five emperors established a great era. It was also these heroes that made countless powerful primitive creatures see the potential of human beings. It was also from then on that the human king who ruled the world could not cultivate. Even if he was rich, he could only live as an ordinary person for the rest of his life. This was a rule that Hong Jun had personally set. For example, even if the emperor of the empire in the Tianwu world cultivated, he could only stop at the Tiangang realm. This was also a rule set by the guardians of the heavenly gates. This was to prevent them from becoming too powerful and eventually surpassing their control. As the representative of the emperor, GFA also did not cultivate. After all, he had to set an example. If even the first emperor recommended by Hongjun secretly cultivated, what about those ambitious people who did not want to be the emperor, but the human king? When his subordinates who had the background of Chan sect and Run sect fought with Yin Shang sect's generals, GFA never stepped forward. Sometimes, even a little bit of the aftermath of the battle was enough to kill King Wu. He was not King Xian of Shang. Without the protection of the emperor's aura that even saints could not use, even a stray arrow on the battlefield could kill him, let alone a battle between immortals. According to the normal course of history, GFA should have been dead by now. However, this son of heaven who had followed the will of the heavens had appeared in the martial heaven world and taken up the position of celestial emperor. Clearly, this martial king wasn't very honest. Even though GFA was an important character in the investiture god Calamity, he had to at least ensure that he was still a human in order to sit on the throne. So in the end, Jiangxia was sent to the investiture god list while GFA wasn't. However, according to GFA's character, Jiang Zia's entry into the investiture of the gods was most likely not voluntary. Instead, after Yinshang was destroyed, GFA forced him into the investiture of the gods and directly sent him to the investiture of the gods. Lin Yuan did not have much interest in GFA. As the saying goes, as long as one stood in the wind, even a pig could fly into the sky. GFA was just a lucky guy chosen by Hongjun. From the beginning to the end, he and his Shiqi did nothing. Almost all the disciples of the Ren sect and the Chan sect fought for him and defeated the soldiers of the Shang dynasty. The only positive effect he played was that no one was willing to be the leader when they made a mistake. After a leader appeared, the rest of the people would ignite the malice in their hearts. If GFA did not take the lead to rebel, they might not have the courage to challenge DXIN. What was even more ridiculous was that GFA and Jichong were not willing to lead the rebellion. However, in Baigon and Boicao's plan, they did not manage to seduce Daji. Instead, they attracted DXIN's suspicion. In addition, Jiang Zia was still nearing the end of his life. If they did not attack Yinshang, Jiang Zia would probably die of old age in bed. The situation of a hero was the most suitable for the father and son of the Ji family. Originally, he was interested in this mysterious heaven sovereign. But now, after returning to the city of trade, Lin Yuan did not see Cyrus and Jiao Yi. After asking a gray-scaled flood dragon person, he found out that although the city of trade had started operating, its influence was quite limited. Even if Lin Yuan could set up an extremely convenient teleportation formation, it would be useless. The sea areas far away from the city of trade would not trade with them. To put it bluntly, they did not trust this group of gray-scaled flood dragon people who suddenly appeared. In addition, with Lin Yuan's northern frontier, those dragon blood demon beasts did not even have the time to suppress the city of trade. How could they take the initiative to trade with the city of trade? Therefore, during this period of time, the business target of the city of trade had always been the sea monster groups near the sea area. However, it was now the war season, and various sea areas could be said to be in short supply for various materials. Even if the city of trade was not as popular as Lin Yuan expected at the beginning, it could still be said that it made a lot of money. Jiao Yi and Cyrus went to other sea areas for two reasons. Firstly, they wanted to continue setting up teleportation formations. Secondly, they wanted to discuss cooperation with other sea areas or persuade them to cooperate with the city of trade. After all, with the supply of resources from the northern frontier, the city of trade would not lack any resources in the short term. As long as these sea areas cooperated with the city of trade once, they would definitely become repeat customers. Judging from the financial report, Jiao Yi's persuasion seemed to be fruitful. Recently, many sea monsters who lived far away came to the city of trade to shop or place orders. It seemed that Jiao Yi had indeed grown up during this period of time. If it was the Jiao Yi of the past, he would most likely stay in the city of trade obediently and wait for Lin Yuan's next instructions when faced with such a predicament. But now Jiao Yi had learned the method of if the mountain doesn't come to me, I'll go to the mountain. Although he still brought Cyrus with him, it was better to be prepared than to be unchanging and arrogant. With a gratified smile, Lin Yuan returned to his own villa. He planned to rest for a while and check out the situation in the endless sea. But before Lin Yuan could sit down, the crab boss barged into Lin Yuan's villa and said with a dignified expression, "Dragon King, you are finally back. The president told me that once you return to the endless sea, no matter what means I use, I will kidnap you if I can't invite you. Anyway, I have to trouble you to meet him." Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and didn't know how to respond. Although he still didn't know the specific situation, now that the president of the Siren Guild had personally come and asked him to meet him, it could only mean that the relationship between the Siren Guild and the dragon tribe of the Four Seas was extremely bad. Even when they were facing such a big enemy like the demon beasts from the outer sea, both sides had no intention of making peace. Otherwise, Lin Yuan would be one of the existences that they would work together to push out. It would be impossible for him to meet the higher-ups of both sides at this time. Moreover, Lin Yuan had previously helped the Siren Guild to take down the Great Wall of Willowshire. For a dragon bloodline demon beast, it was simply a black mark that could not be removed. However, the dragon tribe of the Four Seas seemed to be a little arrogant. Lin Yuan didn't believe that they didn't know about the actions of the Siren Guild. Since they didn't stop it, it meant that they had already expressed their stance. However, they didn't send anyone to contact Lin Yuan, nor did they take the initiative to make peace with the Siren Guild. It was as if they were waiting for Lin Yuan to take the initiative to talk to them. Chapter 1185. No matter how one looked at it, it was not a right decision to get involved in this chaotic world. Especially between the Outer Sea demonic beasts and the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts, their brains were about to spill. Moreover, since Lucia Great Wall was out of the control of the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts, there was no possibility of peace in this war. Either the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts were completely annihilated, and the Outer Sea demonic beasts, who were originally native to the Endless Sea, returned to the Deep Sea. Although it could not be compared with the time when the Whale Clan dominated the Endless Sea, after the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts were eliminated, the Outer Sea demonic beasts would definitely expand rapidly. At least, within 5 years after the war, they would recover to a level that was not inferior to the Hengduan mountain range. This result was undoubtedly something that the natives of the Tianwu world would be happy to see. Just from the fact that Lin Yuan used the tiger skin of the ancient demon court to cover himself, the guardians of the Heaven Gate, who claimed to be the dominators, were full of fear of him and did not dare to attack the northern frontier easily. Judging from the situation, these natives might have challenged the experts from the untainted world more than once. It was just that in every previous battle, these natives were the losers. Another possibility was that the Outer Sea demonic beasts were still suppressed by the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts and retreated to the Outer Sea demonic beasts. When they fought with the aquatic demonic beasts that now occupied the Outer Sea demonic beasts, the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts did not need to pay attention to them. Every year, the Outer Sea demonic beasts would send a few troops to wipe out some of the Outer Sea demonic beasts. Even if they did not completely destroy the Outer Sea demonic beasts, within hundreds of years, the Outer Sea demonic beasts would definitely not be able to catch their breath, let alone continue to challenge the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts. Haha, as for hundreds of years later, when the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas invaded the Endless Sea, it was not more than 150 years since the Whale Clan was exiled, and the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts spread. Now the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts had become a synonym for power and nobility. Even if they were forced into a corner by the Outer Sea demonic beasts, in the end, the reason was because of their internal strife. If the Outer Sea demonic beasts were defeated, there would be no demonic beasts of the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts in the Endless Sea. At a time like this, wouldn't it be crazy to get involved in these matters? This time, Lin Yuan had come to the Endless Sea with the intention of leaving the stage of the northern frontier to Li Zhong and the remaining members of the Jiu family. He wanted to see what they would choose in the end, and then decide what kind of attitude he would use to return to the northern frontier. Of course, using the existence of the city of trade to make a fortune in the Endless Sea was undoubtedly the best choice. But from the looks of it, these Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts had no intention of letting him make a fortune in secret. But on second thought, it made sense. The Four Seas Dragon Tribe and the Siren Guild wouldn't fall out with each other for no reason. Besides, Lin Yuan, who came from the era of information explosion, knew very well that not all forces would tremble in fear and cower in fear under external pressure. On the contrary, the stronger the external pressure, the easier it was for the voices of discord within a certain force to disappear completely. First, they would work together to expel outsiders, and settle the scores later. To the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts, the Outer Sea demonic beasts were such a strong external pressure. In their eyes, the Dragon Bloodline demonic beasts were divided into different ranks. A pureblood dragon tribe's treatment was even better than those who had made great contributions to the Four Seas Dragon Tribe. This was also the biggest source of conflict in the Endless Sea. If it weren't for the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's way of doing things, there wouldn't be a series of forces like the Siren Guild and the Evil Dragon Tribe that opposed the Four Seas Dragon Tribe. However, in the eyes of outsiders, The Siren Guild and the Four Seas Dragon Tribe were all dragon bloodline demonic beasts, and they all had to be destroyed. This was a war that would decide who would survive and who would be destroyed. In this kind of war, not to mention the two sides fighting for themselves, there shouldn't even be a little bit of friction. Otherwise, it would mean that they were afraid that the other side wouldn't be able to win, so they crazily gave the other side a chance. Lin Yuan's face darkened. He stared at the crab boss and said, "So, your president wants me to intervene and let the Siren Guild and the Four Seas Dragon Tribe put down their current prejudice and defeat the Outer Sea demonic beasts first?" "Yes." The crab boss nodded slightly and said in a helpless tone, "You should know that such a low-level mistake is impossible for our president or the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's higher-ups to make. However, the opponent is very cunning, constantly provoking friction between us and the Pureblood Dragon Tribe. Now the two armies can no longer join forces. When facing the enemy, we even have to think about whether the other side will make things difficult for us. This has caused our overall strength to be inferior to the other side. And under the situation where we have been weakened once, we have to divide a considerable amount of people to guard against the positions of these allies. You should have seen it when you returned that the two armies are not only guarding against the Outer Sea demonic beasts." Speaking up to this point, he paused and smiled bitterly. "Just by relying on the higher-ups of both sides, we definitely can't mediate the current conflict. Moreover, the higher-ups of both sides are not completely without grudges about this matter. Compared to the monster beasts at the bottom, we at most want to defeat the monster beasts in the Outer Sea first, and then come back to settle the score." Lin Yuan pondered for a moment, and a dignified look flashed across his eyes. After a moment, Lin Yuan said, "I already understand your meaning, but you should know that I am not a person of virtue and prestige in the Endless Sea. Moreover, with the matter of the Great Wall of Willowshire, I am afraid that many dragon blood demonic beasts will directly regard me as an enemy. Obviously, I am not suitable to be the mediator in your plan. This really wasn't a good job. If it was done well, the dragon blood demonic beasts would unite, and now that the Outer Sea demonic beasts were at odds with the god-worshipping religion, they might have a chance to destroy the Outer Sea demonic beasts. At the very least, they would be able to defeat them and regain control of the Great Wall of Willowshire. However, if the dragon blood demonic beasts won, would it be a good thing? The so-called way of dominating, in the final analysis, was nothing more than two words: benefits and benefits. As the saying goes, lure with benefits and drive away with harm. The Outer Sea demonic beasts could provoke the conflict between the dragon race of the Four Seas and the Sea Demon Guild. Perhaps they did not rely on any conspiracy or trickery, but on the original conflict between both sides to create such a situation. Just like what the crab boss had said, the higher-ups of both sides were not without grudges. The fundamental reason why they did not directly fall out with each other was that they were more aware of the danger of the Outer Sea demonic beasts. They planned to deal with the Outer Sea demonic beasts first, and then solve the internal problems. Chapter 1186. Taking a step back, the Sea Monster Guild and the Dragon Tribe of the Four Seas did have quite a big conflict. However, for both sides, the city of trade that Lin Yuan built in the Endless Sea was also a threat like the Outer Sea monster beasts. After defeating the Outer Sea monster beasts, a similar settlement would also fall on the city of trade. This time, he did not have the Outer Sea monster beasts to rely on. He was afraid that the northern frontier did not have such strength to fight the dragon bloodline monster beasts head-on. Therefore, from Lin Yuan's point of view, he hoped that the dragon bloodline monster beasts would not win this battle. Of course, this premise was based on the premise that the Outer Sea monster beasts had nothing to do with the Heavenly Court. Otherwise, he would rather leave the Endless Sea than let the Heavenly Court, which was his sworn enemy, occupy the Endless Sea. Lin Yuan's nature was like this. As a businessman in his previous life, if he didn't have such a personality, he wouldn't have been able to turn his small workshop into a listed company even though he wasn't rich and didn't have a strong background. This was because most of the time he would rather not make money himself than snipe his opponents. Therefore, in the business world, most people were unwilling to make enemies with a weirdo like him. Of course, This was under the condition that he did a good job and successfully made the Sea Monster Guild and the dragon tribe of the Four Seas work together to fight against the enemy. The other situation was even worse. As the Dragon of Sin that helped the outer sea monster beasts to take down the Great Wall of Willow, Lin Yuan might not be accepted by the Sea Monster Guild and the dragon tribe of the Four Seas. Just like what Lin Yuan said, to do this job, it would either be a person of virtue and prestige who could convince both sides, or an existence that both sides would not dare to easily deal with even if they worked together. Lin Yuan obviously did not meet these conditions. In his opinion, the Sea Monster Guild was just trying to find a doctor in a desperate situation. Of course, this didn't mean that Lin Yuan couldn't do anything about it. He just didn't think that both sides would cooperate to that extent. Boss Crab waved his pincers helplessly and said with a bitter smile, "The problem now is not whether you think you can be the middleman to mediate the conflict between us and the Four Seas Dragon Tribe. Instead, our president wants to see you. I believe you can also see that the Four Seas Dragon Tribe must be watching our every move, but I still managed to reach you without a hitch. This also means that the higher-ups of both sides are inclined to throw this mess to you." Speaking of this, it took a step back, and the bitter smile on its face became more intense. It said, "Please come with me. Don't make things difficult for an errand boy like me, okay?" Boss Crab was very afraid of the Black Jiao's methods. Previously, the Four Seas Dragon Tribe had joined forces with the Sea Monster Guild to plot against the Black Jiao. Good lord, not long after, the outer sea monsters had directly attacked the deep sea area. The Four Seas Dragon Tribe had spent countless resources and countless time to build the Willowstone Great Wall, but it didn't have much use at all. It was directly attacked by the outer sea monsters. Now it had become the outer sea monsters' headquarters. It was obvious that the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's painstaking efforts of countless generations of Dragon King would become a wedding dress for the outer sea monsters. The current situation had already deteriorated to such a state. Unfortunately, the pureblood and mixed-blood dragons at the bottom of the hierarchy had been successfully instigated by the outer sea monsters. Now both sides were no longer at the stage where they couldn't see eye to eye. Instead, as long as they found an opportunity, they would directly stab these allies in the back. In such a situation, if they had to think of someone who could break out of this situation, they could only think of the Black Jiao who had a symbiotic relationship with Miracle. Lin Yuan took a deep breath, and his blue-white eyes flashed with an obscure light. After a while he coldly stared at Boss Crab and smiled. "I've said it before. I'm not a person of virtue and prestige. If you try to make me mediate the problem between you, then I'm sorry, but this war will definitely be lost." Boss Crab stared blankly at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan and Boss Crab looked at each other and said with a smile, "And in this battle, you have made several fatal mistakes. Let me give you an example. You did not block information about the defeat of the Great Wall of Willow. This means that you did not give ideological guidance to the soldiers under your command at the right time. You did not let them feel that the demon beasts from the outer sea were evil and trying to destroy you. If you blocked the information about the battle intent of the Great Wall of Willow, and then deliberately exaggerated how miserable the sea area was when the demon beasts from the outer sea broke through, how the defenders of the Great Wall of Willow fought bravely when they were isolated and helpless. In the end, they were slaughtered one by the demon beasts from the outer sea, and their image was completely tainted. Then the demon beasts from the outer sea would not be able to incite you at all, not to mention whether your soldiers would listen to their instigation. Even if they saw them, they would have pounced on them and directly tore the demon beasts from the outer sea to shreds. For someone like Lin Yuan who had come from an era of information explosion, he knew a bit about all kinds of military strategies. He also had some understanding of all kinds of classic battles. Adding on the existence of the communication network and transportation formations, even if his military accomplishments weren't high, it was enough for him to beat these natives of the martial heaven world. That was because with the support of the system and the Joss Flames, Lin Yuan was able to easily achieve things that those famous generals in history could only achieve if they had the right time, place, and people. He had achieved impossible victories. In the martial heaven world, when it came to the art of war, people like Lei Qiuxing, Yan Xingqi, and Zhao Xiang could be said to be unparalleled in the country. At most, they could only wrestle with Lin Yuan. If they really fought, it was hard to say whether they would be a match for Lin Yuan. For example, in the weak Song dynasty, even the emperor and important ministers were in a situation where they were in favor of peace and surrender. Even people like Yu Fei and Han Shizhong, who were known as national heroes, were able to pull out elite troops that could make the Jin dynasty throw away their armor. This involved the ideological education of an army. Only by making the soldiers hate the other side, wanting nothing more than to eat the other side's flesh and blood, could they achieve a series of victories in a situation where they were at an absolute disadvantage. Clearly, the dragon bloodline demonic beast's score in this aspect was 0. It could even be said to be negative. It was crazily giving the other side a chance to counterattack. This is indeed our problem. Although the crab boss wasn't a soldier, he was able to become one of the people in charge of the Sea Demon Guild. His foresight and shrewdness couldn't be too bad. So when Lin Yuan's voice sounded, he realized that if they had followed Lin Yuan's plan from the start, then the outer sea demonic beasts wouldn't have been able to successfully sow discord between them. Chapter 1187. So, now that I've finished talking about your first mistake, I think you should have realized why you are now being forced to this point by the outer sea monsters. So let's talk about your second mistake. Your army seems to be powerful, but in fact, there is no unified commander. In other words, there is no commander among you who can convince both armies. No, that's not quite accurate. To be precise, not to mention both sides, even the Sea Monster Guild and the Four Seas Dragon Clan have different opinions in their own army system. This is because you have never established a suitable reward system. Even the demonic beasts who have made great contributions to the dragon bloodline demonic beasts will not receive appropriate rewards. In other words, even those who have made no contributions to the dragon bloodline demonic beasts will receive the best treatment and the highest status as long as their bloodline is pure enough. In such a system, your biggest problem is internal discord. For example, the commander who guarded the Willowstone Great Wall was a good general, but he could only command his own soldiers. Once things got out of control, all kinds of voices in the entire army would erupt, forcing him to make a decision that he knew was wrong. Don't doubt it. The Great Wall of Willowstone was lost because of this problem. Your current situation is also a factor of this problem. To put it simply, your military system is too chaotic. You don't have a unified commander. When you set up camp, you might not see any problems, but once you leave the camp and start fighting, military orders will definitely not be smooth. At that time, you will definitely fight your own battles. For example, some people want to chase, some want to withdraw, some want to retreat, and some want to clean up the battlefield. Therefore, the problem you have to solve now is not only to mediate the internal conflicts, but also to ensure that all the soldiers under your command have a unified commander. You have to eliminate all the voices of discord within the army. You must know that in order to become an officer in the Northern Region Army, you have to go to the Northern Military Academy to study, and the first lesson they learn is, military orders must be obeyed. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a deep voice, the so-called military orders are like mountains. In other words, the orders issued by the commander are like an unshakable mountain. No matter what the order is, as long as you receive it, you must execute it. Even if you are crushed under this mountain, you can't complain at all. But I'm sorry to say that I don't see any military accomplishment from you at all. On the contrary, the outer sea monster beasts are united and harmonious. It's obvious that they have similar actions. Boss Crab took 2 steps back and looked at Lin Yuan with fear. It did not dare to speak, nor did it know what it could say. The Endless Sea had always been an abnormal place. In this place, no matter if it was strength or merit, they couldn't compare to the bloodline. The situation on the Siren Guild side was actually a little better, but they were a loosely structured organization, so there were many times when they couldn't reach a consensus. When things came to a head, they would all do their own thing. The situation on the Four Seas Dragon Tribe's side was even more ridiculous. Every one of them was using their pure bloodline to suppress others. Even a weakling who didn't even dare to see blood could become a commander. As for those with mixed bloodlines, even if they were war artists, they had to obediently serve as cannon fodder. To put it bluntly, these were the problems that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts were facing. And just as Lin Yuan said, these problems were fatal. But he couldn't change it. The endless sea had been like this for so many years. Even if they were aware of the problem, how could they change it just because they wanted to? Lin Yuan tilted his head and suddenly changed the topic. He said, "Your eyes tell me that the problems I mentioned do exist, and you are aware of these problems. But the despair hidden in your eyes also tells me that even if you are aware of these problems, you can't change it." Speaking of this, he paused and revealed a mocking smile. He added, "So the current situation is that in this war, you have no chance of turning the tables. I suggest you pack up and give up on the endless sea." Gulp. Boss Crab swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His face was still filled with shock. After a while, Boss Crab said faintly, "If we do as you say and solve these problems, can we win this war and eliminate all the outer sea monster beasts?" Haha. Lin Yuan sneered twice. Then, he threw the dragon tail on the table in front of him and said, "You may have misunderstood my words. I'm just telling you that these are the fatal problems of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. If you change it, you may not win this war. But if you don't change it, then I'm sorry, but you will definitely lose." The Tianwu world's study of the art of war was very shallow. But Lin Yuan was not like that. Lin Yuan could see that the outer sea monster beasts had completely given up on their territory. Even the tribes of the outer sea monster beasts that were originally fighting against each other were now united. It was obvious that they were going to cut off all means of retreat. From the moment the Great Wall of Willowstone was breached, this war had already decided that either the outer sea monster beasts or the dragon bloodline demonic beasts would completely withdraw from the stage of the endless sea. If the situation was more serious, it was possible that one of them would be completely destroyed. This is your third problem. Until now, you all think that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts have only suffered a small loss, and that victory is still within your grasp. Even after realizing your own problems, you still have the illusion that as long as you make some changes, you can easily win against the outer sea monster beasts? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and smashed his dragon tail on the table. He sneered and said, "Bullshit. Dream on. You have cerebral palsy. I can tell you responsibly right now that the side that is truly at a disadvantage in this war has never been the outer sea monster beasts. If you change the problems that have existed in the past and only clean up the internal atmosphere, so that you have the strength to fight against the outer sea monster beasts, even if you really do that, you only have a 40% chance of winning this war." Speaking up to here, Lin Yuan let out a long breath and added, "Boss Crab, you are the person in charge of the Sea Monster Guild in the City of Commerce. Although we didn't get along well before, no matter what, you are still half my people. So if you are willing to cooperate, I don't mind protecting your life. As for the rest, you can forget about it. That's all. Relay my words to your president. It's up to you to decide whether you want to stay or leave." Chapter 1188. Lin Yuan's words were indeed not alarmist. The battle between the dragon blood beasts and the beasts from the outer sea was no longer evenly matched. The beasts from the outer sea had already gained the upper hand. If it were not for the greed of the strange man, who did not cooperate with the god worship sect, and insisted on involving the heavenly court, the army from the outer sea would have already started to invade the other seas instead of just stopping at the Great Wall of Willowstone. However, even a wise man would make a mistake. No one could truly make a perfect plan. Many times, a small change in the details could lead the whole thing to another direction. Just like how the strange man tried to use the power of the heavenly court to kick the god worship sect out of the competition, the result was self-defeating. Even Lin Yuan, a bystander who knew a lot of karma, couldn't see who was the winner at the end of the game at this moment. The crab boss took a deep breath, looked at Lin Yuan with a complicated expression, and said helplessly, "Dragon King, in this chaotic world, no one can stay out of trouble. Previously, the Dragon Tribe and the Sea Monster Union joined hands to deal with you. How can you be sure that after the dragon blood beasts are defeated, the beasts from the outer sea will not deal with you? For them, they have lived for countless years in order to take back the position of the overlord of the endless sea. Now that they can use you, of course, they will say good things. However, if the dragon blood beasts are defeated, I am afraid that they will turn against you faster than anyone else. You know that's not the case. Lin Yuan smiled and said with a deep voice, however, compared to the dragon blood beasts, this king believes more in the beasts from the outer sea who have been friendly to this king. After the beasts from the outer sea dominate the endless sea, it is still unknown whether they will attack this king or not. However, once the dragon blood beasts pass this hurdle, I am afraid that the first thing you will deal with is this king, right? The crab boss was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he raised his head and said with a bitter smile, an existence like you will not stay under others for a long time. No matter who is the overlord of the endless sea, sooner or later, they will have to fight with you. I have heard this from the president before I came to see you. Oh, Lin Yuan replied with great interest. He even purposely lengthened his voice as if he was interested in the president of the Siren Guild that he had never met before. Boss Crab muttered to himself for a moment, as if he was organizing his words. Then he continued. However, our Sea Monster Guild has never wanted to fight for the position of the overlord of the endless sea. You should be able to see that we are just an idle guild. Otherwise, based on the fact that we have the power to fight against the dragon tribe of the four seas, they would not have allowed us to exist until now. Our attitude towards you can actually change. The president's intention is for the Siren Guild to take out 40% of the profits in exchange for 40% of the profits in the City of Trade. This way, your position in the Siren Guild will be second only to the president, and we will also treat you as one of our own. Looking at Lin Yuan's thoughtful expression, the crab boss added, also the president said that you might choose to stay out of this at this time. Therefore, he can promise to hand over the highest command of the dragon bloodline demonic beasts to you. If you want more authority, I think you'll have to meet our president. Wow, what a big deal. Even though Lin Yuan had already made up his mind, he could not help but raise his eyebrows at this moment. The dragon tribe of the Four Seas and the Siren Guild had already started an internal conflict. However, the dragon tribe of the Four Seas did not interfere when the Siren Guild asked him to mediate. This meant that the higher-ups of the dragon tribe of the Four Seas were also inclined to let him handle this matter. Even before this, the two sides had already reached some kind of agreement. The problems that Lin Yuan had mentioned before were all real, and they were not difficult to detect. It was precisely because of these problems that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts had started to decline after dominating the endless sea. After all, the dragon tribe was a very strange creature. They did not have any reproductive isolation with any other species. Furthermore, to the dragon tribe of the Great Desolate World, as long as they had the dragon bloodline, they would be a member of the dragon tribe. They would only call them different names based on their appearance and habits. For example, flood dragon, alligator, and so on. However, the dragon clan of the Heaven Martial World just had to play some tricks. They created a pure-blooded dragon clan. In the deep sea, there were sea monsters that were obviously different from the dragon clan. They obviously had the dragon clan's bloodline, but they still called them red crab, brave crab, and so on. It was as if the dragon clan of the Four Seas had the purest dragon clan's bloodline. If these creatures were placed in the desolate world, they would at most be at the flood dragon clan's level. As the saying goes, a bucket of water does not make a sound, but a bucket of water does. However, this was the problem, and there was no way to solve it. This was because the dragon tribe of the endless sea had always done this. Once it involved reforms, it would definitely violate the interests of many people. If it really came to that, the demonic beasts of the outer sea would not even need to attack. The demonic beasts of the outer sea would be able to destroy themselves. For example, Lin Yuan had made so many reforms. He had killed so many aristocratic families in the northern frontier that they did not dare to raise their heads. He had killed so many sects in the northern frontier that they disbanded. However, the current northern frontier was still very chaotic and heterogeneous. Once there was any negligence, someone would cause trouble. However, the problems that the dragon bloodline demonic beasts could not solve themselves could be thrown to Lin Yuan to solve. This was because Lin Yuan was now an extremely special existence in the Tianwu world. Whether it was his personal strength or his military accomplishments, he could be considered an existence that was unparalleled in the world. Unless the true old monsters of the Heavenly Gate Guardians appeared, no one would be able to suppress his limelight. Therefore, it was not unacceptable for the dragon bloodline demonic beasts to hand over command to Lin Yuan. On the contrary, ever since Lin Yuan had appeared, he had never lost a battle no matter what difficulties he faced. This was like a shot of cardiac stimulant, instantly giving the dragon bloodline demonic beasts a huge boost of morale. Moreover, Lin Yuan's philosophy of using people had always been: the capable would go up, the mediocre would give way, and the mediocre would be demoted. Perhaps other commanders would have scruples about which clan the demonic beasts under their command came from, the cultivation level of their parents, the purity of their bloodline, and what level they could reach in the future. However, Lin Yuan would not care about this. In Lin Yuan's eyes, a genius who would die in a day could not even compare to a fool who could live for 100 years. A potential that could not be realized in a short period of time had no potential. Therefore, without sufficient strength, no matter how pure their bloodline was, they would only be cannon fodder in Lin Yuan's eyes. Furthermore, no demonic beasts would dare to raise any objections. Chapter 1189. This was because the current war was a huge catastrophe for the dragon bloodline demonic beasts as a group. Under such circumstances, there was not a single dragon bloodline demonic beast that did not wish to win this war. After all, the immediate gains and losses were better than direct extermination of their clan, or even becoming slaves of the outer sea demonic beasts. They could still tell which was more important. As for the higher-ups of both sides, they did not need to pay anything. They only needed to let Lin Yuan govern for a period of time, and they would naturally get used to this style of governance. After defeating the outer sea demonic beasts, the higher-ups of both sides did not even need to do anything to continue this style of governance and correct it at the smallest cost. This was because, given Lin Yuan's character, when some dragon bloodline demonic beasts insisted on going against him, there was no doubt that they would carry out all kinds of dangerous missions until the battle ended or they were killed. Even if there were some who did not go against Lin Yuan, and wanted to wait until the outer sea demonic beasts were pacified before carrying out the restoration, it did not matter. This was because under Lin Yuan's governance style, there would inevitably be a group of people with mixed bloodlines but outstanding abilities who would benefit from the benefits. With such a group, no matter how much trouble the dragon bloodline demonic beasts could cause, they would eventually be completely annihilated. Even for the higher-ups of both sides, this was a kind of check and balance. Interesting. Lin Yuan pondered for a moment and suddenly said with a smile, "Unfortunately, I'm not interested in this supreme command. Even if you give me this power verbally, what can I do if those dragon bloodline demonic beasts don't listen to me?" At this point, Lin Yuan had already slightly squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "I roughly understand what you mean. Now that the water is too muddy, I have to wait and see before deciding whether to participate or not. However, before I really take action, I can help you with some trivial matters. I don't want the so-called supreme command. As for the specific needs, I will contact you again. As for your president, I'm not interested in meeting him now. That's it. This king is tired." Compared to the information from the information explosion era in his mind, the current endless sea was actually somewhat similar to the Sui dynasty. Although the comments of the later generations about the Sui dynasty were not very good, the real Sui dynasty was undeniably prosperous. Even before Wu Zetian, Yang Jian and Yang Guang had already turned the Sui dynasty into the overlord of East Asia. Compared to Li Shimon's later generation, where the godfather gave out money, but the fools didn't come, the Sui dynasty and the Wuzhou dynasty were the real times when all the countries came to pay their respects. The so-called rule of Zhengguan, and the 24 meritorious officials of the Lingyang Pavilion, were a joke in the eyes of those who truly understood history. Cheng Yaojin, Yu Qigong, Qin Qiong, Wei Zheng, and the other officials and generals who had been in the limelight during the Sui dynasty were basically invisible existences. Even the founder of the Great Tang, Li Yuan, who could be considered top-notch in all aspects, was only a minor governor of Jinyang in Yangguang's hands. This was because the Sui dynasty was the peak of the great clans, and rare talents in other eras were as common as cabbages in the Sui dynasty. Li Shimen's batch were all eliminated products of the Sui dynasty, and some of them could not even be considered eliminated products. Just like the various sea demon clans in the Endless Sea, the brave crab tribe such as Taimu was only a branch of the crab tribe, and it was a relatively weak branch, but it still had 3 demon kings. From this, it could be seen that the real powerful clans had a lot of resources, not to mention the situation of the dragon tribe of the 4 seas from the untainted world. Not to mention the 6 dragon gods. Even the 9 sons of the dragon were enough to make all the clans in the Endless Sea pale. Adding the other demon kings without titles, they were just like stars in the sky. Lin Yuan could help the Endless Sea change the current situation. And this was something that had been done before. During the Sui dynasty, the real military god Yang Su had done something similar. Moreover, Yang Su, who was regarded by later generations as someone who was hard to distinguish between a loyal and a traitor, was a real top talent in the Sui dynasty. Even the military god of the Tang dynasty, Li Jing, was just a primary school student in front of Yang Su, and he had even received guidance from Yang Su. Yang Su emphasized the word ruthless when training troops. To give a specific example, after Yang Guang succeeded the throne, the king of Han, Yang Liang, rebelled. Relying on Yang Jian's favoritism for his youngest son, Yang Liang directly took out 300,000 troops. At that time, Yang Guang only had 100,000 troops in his hands. Among these 100,000 troops, Yang Guang only gave Yang Su 40,000 troops. This was a typical example of using and defending at the same time. At the same time, he let Yang Su send troops to pacify Yang Liang, and at the same time he hinted to Yang Su, "I still have 60,000 troops in my hands. If you have any other thoughts, you'd better consider whether you're my opponent." Therefore, Yang Su led 40,000 troops to take the initiative to attack Yang Liang, and Yang Liang's side directly made a confusing move. 300,000 troops against Yang Su's 40,000 troops, and Yang Liang's move was to defend the city and not come out. Just based on this matter, one could see how fierce Yang Su's reputation was. After all, before this, Yang Su had experienced 3 dynasties and countless battles. He rarely lost in his life. Whether it was internal or external battles, Yang Su could be called an expert. Even when facing the Turkic Khagan, who fought until Li Shimen bit his toothpick and made the Wei River Alliance, Yang Su's troops could not wait to take a detour. When Yang Guang went out to the grasslands, the Turkic Khagan even cut off the flesh on his leg and offered it to Yang Guang to show his loyalty. When Yang Su used his troops, he was basically sending his soldiers to their deaths. Moreover, he used his actions to tell these soldiers that they either had to listen to his orders and fight the enemy, or they didn't have the guts to go, and he would directly kill them as a sacrifice before personally fighting the enemy. In this way of leading a troop that was filled with the smell of blood, the troops under Yang Su were not afraid of death at all. Even if they were hit by a blade on the battlefield, as long as they didn't die on the spot, they could still laugh and return the blade to the enemy. It was also because of this battle style that Yang Su's opponents didn't dare to face him directly when they heard his name. Even so, Yang Su was still the most popular general in the Sui dynasty. Those Sui dynasty soldiers racked their brains and all wanted to be the Suicide Squad under Yang Su. This was because when looking at the entire Sui dynasty, the aristocratic families were extremely powerful. The civil officials and generals were all people from aristocratic families. At that time, just Lin Yuan alone was able to nurture people like Li Shimen, Li Jiancheng, Li Xiaoning, and so on. The other aristocratic families were not weak either. Not to mention the grassroots. Even those from humble backgrounds could not easily make a name for themselves in that era. Unless you really had the ability of a war immortal or a strategy saint. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.